Okay. Hi, everyone. Let me just do a quick check to see who is here. Is Kim here? I don't see. Let me check. Okay, so we'll give a little bit of time for the co-sponsor. I see Councillor Flynn, Councillor Bach.
Councilor Wu, I think Council President Janey just came in. She just needs to be let in as a panelist.
Thank you. Could Carrie give my laptop administrative privileges to? Thank you.
I can't control my video. Thanks, you guys. Thanks for letting me in, but I can't control my video.
Yeah, neither, Carrie.
Okay.
Okay, I see. They're good. Let's see who else we have. And Neil, thank you so much for the file. I believe that's been forwarded to all the counselors now, so folks should have that before the meeting. Are folks, everyone from the administration here that you all are hoping for? I see Emma.
I think we're just waiting on John Barrows, Counselor.
John Barrows. Okay, got it. Emma, Selena, Kevin. Okay. Okay, so we'll give another minute or so for Chief Barrows, who I don't see on yet, but if anyone correct me if he does come on, we'll give it just a tiny bit more time. Okay, so I see Chief Barros on now. Let me do another quick scan through to see if we have all our panelists. Senator Wilkerson, Ms. Flint Banks, Shagun. Madam President, did you get confirmation from Haris?
No.
Okay, perfect. Then we'll move along. Carrie, are we good to go?
Absolutely, ready when you are.
Okay, so I will bang my glass to gavel us to order. Welcome to the Boston City Council's Committee on Post-Audit and Oversight. We are here for a hearing on docket number 0390. Oops, let me turn on my video as well. We're here for a hearing on docket 0390, a hearing on equity in City of Boston purchasing and procurement. This matter was sponsored by myself, as well as our council president, Kim Janey. My name is Michelle Wu. I'm proud to chair the Committee on Post-Audit and Oversight. And I'm joined by many of my colleagues. So let me look down the list. Again, the co-sponsor, Council President Kim Janey, Councilor Ed Flynn, Councilor Kenzie Bach, Councilor Julia Mejia. I think that's everyone from the council side so far. I want to remind everyone that this is a public hearing being recorded and broadcast and will be rebroadcasted on Comcast 8, RCN 82, and Verizon 1964 at a later date. It's currently being streamed on the City of Boston's website. We will take public testimony at the end of this hearing. If you're interested in testifying, please email ron.cobb, that's ron.cobb at boston.gov for the link to testify, and then follow along on the live stream so you can know when it's your turn to speak. I want to read 2 letters into the record from colleagues who could not join, and then I'll pass it over to my council colleagues for an opening statement. Then we'll go to a presentation from our esteemed colleagues in the administration, and then hear from esteemed panelists representing the community and leadership in the advocacy world. Okay, so let me pull up the letters on my screen. The first from District 4 City Councilor Andrea Campbell. Dear Chairwoman and colleagues on the Committee of Post-Audit and Oversight, I regretfully cannot attend today's hearing on docket number 0930 regarding an order for a hearing on equity in City of Boston procurement and purchasing. I commend the sponsors of today's hearing for continuing the hard work of ensuring equity in procurement and purchasing. Today, racial wealth disparities in the City of Boston are extreme, with a household median net worth of $8 for Black Bostonians and $247,500 for white Bostonians. For fiscal year 2018, of the more than $664 million the City of Boston spent on procurement contracts, less than 1% went to minority-owned businesses. Government has to take the lead in addressing racial inequities, and the City of Boston is in a position to demonstrate the equity-focused policymaking it takes to address these racial inequities head-on. I'll be ably represented by a member of my staff at today's hearing and look forward to reviewing the recording and committee report and working with the committee on any recommended steps. Sincerely, Andrea Campbell, Boston City Councilor, District 4. The other letter comes from District 8 City Councilor Liz Braden, and it reads, Madam Chair, I regret I'll be unable to attend today's hearing on docket number 0390 regarding equity in the City of Boston procurement and purchasing. I'm traveling and will not have a reliable internet connection. Please be assured that I fully support increasing equity in this space and will work with your committee and the administration to ensure that women and minority-owned businesses have increased access to contracts with the city. Please read this letter into the record. Sincerely yours, Councilor Liz Braden, District 9. Okay, so let's jump into opening statements from colleagues, starting with the co-sponsor, Council President Kim Janey.
Can you hear me okay, everyone?
You can.
Okay, thank you so much. So I want to begin, and I really hope to keep this brief. I want to get right into the conversation, but I wanted to start by thanking you, Councilor Wu, for your steadfast commitment on this issue. Prior to me joining the council for sure, and since I've joined, I'm really grateful for your partnership. And this is one of the main reasons why it was important to create and bring back this committee so that we could have this important conversation. I also want to thank the administration. I see that Chief Barrows is on the call and Selena. I'm sure other members of the team are here. Wanted to thank you for your work and your commitment to doing better here. And that's what I want us to focus on. You heard in our colleague's letter some of the data points, and we'll get deeper into the data when we hear from the administration in terms of their presentation, as well as our questions. This clearly is deeply rooted in our Black and Brown agenda and what we hope to move forward in terms of dealing with a number of the racial and economic gaps in our city. This is a huge one. You heard the data, 664 million spent in 2018 with less than 1% going to local businesses owned by people of color or women. Clearly, there's a lot more work that can be done to improve those numbers, and we cannot rest until we get there. Again, this is deeply rooted in the Black and Brown agenda. I want us to use this time and this hearing to come up with some solutions. I'm hoping that we are going to move beyond what we had heard from the last hearing, the last time we convened and had a conversation, but how we are really going to shake things up and radically change how we do business in the city of Boston. So with that, I'm going to reserve the rest of my comment and questions for the appropriate time. Thank you so much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam President. Next on the list is Councillor Ed Flynn.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilor Wu, and thank you, Councilor Janey, for bringing forth this important hearing. Thank you to the administration team that's also here and working on this important issue as well. We are having a much needed discussion on racial equity and justice. We also need to talk about how we can proactively help our Black and Brown residents and women obtain economic security. City contracts and procurement is a way to do that for women, people of color, in Boston business owners. I would also like to hear a little bit about some of the outreach we're doing on immigrant-owned businesses as well. So I'm looking forward to this hearing today. I know that we passed the Equity and City of Boston Contracts Ordinance with the eye towards prioritizing our women and minority-owned businesses, which I support. It is important that the city do what we can to further the economic opportunities for women, people of color, locally owned businesses, and immigrant-owned businesses. Again, I want to say thank you to Councilor Janey. I want to say thank you to Councilor Rowe, and thank you to Mayor Walsh's team for being here and for the work they've been doing on this important issue as well. And looking forward to hearing from the advocates across the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Flynn. Next up is Councillor Kenzie Bach.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just glad to be here. Want to thank President Janey and yourself for sponsoring this today. I, as folks know, used to work at the Boston Housing Authority, and there's a federal statute called Section 3 that sort of forces the Housing Authority and HUD-funded entities to have this conversation about how you're creating jobs and opportunities for folks in minority, women-owned business communities, and I really appreciated the fact that that very explicit framework was there when I worked there. It didn't mean that we were always hitting the targets that we should be, but it was like a very explicit framework that was in federal law that people were pushing for. And I really think the more we can just make this part of not a kind of nice to have, but a must have in city contracting, the better. And I'm obviously new here and hugely appreciate all the work in ordinances and oversight that council colleagues have been doing on this front for the last few years. So I'm really interested to dig in and to think about how we identify, our pipeline problems, how we get past the sort of limitations of federal and state procurement laws to the real solutions of, okay, well, as long as that's the space where we're playing within, how do we create the right pipeline of folks so that we can really move the needle in terms of the proportion of spending. So interested to ask those questions today, and really appreciate, again, the makers for convening this. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Next up, Councillor Julia Mejia.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me and see me? Yes. Ain't no party unless you can hear me. Okay, so good afternoon. I am grateful to be here. Thank you to the chair and Council President Janey for continuing to have this conversation about equity in our city contracting. When I first heard that less than 1% of city contracts were going to minority and women-owned businesses, I had to ask myself if I was hearing that correctly, and asked to hear it one more time because I was sure that I misheard something. But this is the reality that we're in. When we were running for office, our campaign headquarters was located on a street where next to restaurants, barbershops, nail salons, clothing stores, and grocery stores, and so much more, all owned by people of color and women. There is a thriving community of businesses owned by people of color and women, and it is our job as leaders to hold ourselves accountable to plugging them in and making ourselves accessible to them. During this hearing, as the chair of the Committee on Small Businesses and Consumer Affairs and Workforce Development, I'll be asking questions around accessibility, language access, and government transparency. Many of these questions my colleagues have heard me ask already, but today I hope to get answers that point us in the direction of finding actual solutions to this inequities. When we've known for over a year now what kinds of inequities exist in the system, now we need to know what has been done about it since then, and what needs to be done moving forward. I would like to thank the administration for participating in this conversation. And now that I've read my written remarks and got that out of the way, I think it's really important for us to recognize that we can't continue to keep having the same conversation and expecting different results. We've gotten to a point in time where people are feeling like all of their advocacy continues to fall on deaf ears. And I know that the administration has made many gains to ensure that we have a more equitable process, but I'm very concerned about the lack of engagement when it comes to those folks who are having a hard time accessing the information. And so I'm really looking forward to being a partner in making sure that we can right these wrongs. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia. We've also been joined by two colleagues that I want to go to next for an opening statement. First will be Councilor Asabi George, and then next, Councilor Arroyo. Councilor Anissa Asabi George.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks to the maker for this hearing order or this effort, really, this large-scale effort that has been underway for a number of years on the council. Look forward to the findings of today's hearing. Want to better understand not just how we can work within the policies that exist and the statute that exists right now, but what are the steps that we need to take in order to change that. So excited about the work that has happened so far, but obviously excited about the greater strides we can make going forward. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And now Councilor Ricardo Arroyo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just briefly on this, I want to thank everybody for the work that's been ongoing on really trying to create a plan for procurement and for contracting that lifts up our communities done correctly. This is an opportunity for the city to really decrease racial wealth gaps, to really give hands up to its residents and ensure that we're creating an economy that not only works for all of us, but includes all of us. And so I'm excited to be part of this work and hoping that we can make real progress.
Thank you so much. I know other colleagues may be joining us. I just got a note from Councilor Edwards that she's running a little bit late. So we'll get to them as we move to questions. For my part, I just want to thank everyone for continuing, as many have noted, a years-long effort. Even before I joined the council, this had been championed by then Councilor Presley. We took it up together when we passed an ordinance in 2017 following a year plus of hearings and conversations that dovetailed with the administration's first executive order in 2016. We've had lots of conversations ongoing about nexus studies and what might come of that, and sort of the years that we've been eagerly awaiting for the results there. And in the, December 2017, the ordinance passed. So in the 2+ years that it has been on the books, hoping to get us to the point where we can have more regular reporting. The ordinance requires quarterly reporting. So in this whole time, I think we've received 2 reports so far, and I will count today's data as a third one, but we are falling short of the requirements by city ordinance to provide that transparency directly to the city council and to residents. So we're eager for an update. Very grateful to the administration for joining us today. I will hand it over to, I know there's several people here on the team. I don't know if we're going to Chief Handy or Chief Barrows first, or Director Barrios Milner, but or Purchasing Director Kevin Coyne, but the floor is yours in whatever order. And oh, sorry, one last note. I see Councilor Flaherty has joined us as well. Councilor Flaherty, would you like to give a very quick opening statement?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Obviously, just looking forward to hearing the testimony from the administration and the advocates and other stakeholders to see what improvements have been put in place and what we need to do to remove barriers for people. I know that, and I appreciate your sponsorship and also Council President's co-sponsorship. And I think you did a nice job reminding folks that this started back in December of 2017 and was signed into law by the mayor on December 14th of 2017. So I know we also held a hearing last year to discuss the progress of the ordinance. So looking forward to hearing what that progress is and how we can continue to work together to make sure that we're reaching all of our residents and all of our vendors. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Council. Okay, so we'll hand it over to the administration at this point and let us know if you need the screen, and I will ask Carrie to help with that.
Councilor Wu, Madam President, Janie, and all of the councilors. My name is John Barrows, and I am Chief of Economic Development for the City of Boston. Just wanted to check my microphone and make sure you can hear me.
Yes, sound good.
Thank you. I am joined here today by the Chief of Administration and Finance, Emma Handy. Also joined on this at this hearing by Selena Barrios Milner, Director of Equity Inclusion for the Office of Economic Development. We would like to start with the presentation. So if you can allow us to screen. Selena, are you doing the presentation?
Yeah, so if you can let me share the screen.
While Selena gets ready to share her screen, I do want to recognize, as was recognized in the opening statements by councilors, that this is a very long-term effort in partnership with the council. I want to thank the council for your leadership on this. The administration and the mayor continues to recognize that we will move the needle on this together in partnership and in collaboration. So I just want to thank you again for the opportunity to present the current information, current findings on procurement, equitable procurement for the city of Boston. Now that we have the slides up, I just wanted to say for today's presentation, what we want to do is take you through information on the spend for the COVID-19, during the COVID-19 pandemic. We also want to talk about capacity building and technical assistance, really giving you an update on the executive order that the mayor signed, right? And so we'll talk about capacity building and technical assistance. We'll talk about, in fact, the quarterly spend and where we are, and then get into some of the finer details of the equitable procurement executive order that I referenced earlier that was signed by the mayor last November. So first, I want to start by talking about the COVID-19 impact and city response. And as you know, very early on during the pandemic, we were hearing from small businesses, even before an order to shut down, that in fact, consumer confidence had dropped so low, given all the information and the threat for the virus, that people were no longer going to restaurants, were no longer going to some of our smaller businesses, no longer going to any hospitality businesses and retail businesses. And so we quickly started to reach out to the small businesses and did a business survey. And the business survey has provided a wealth of information during this whole time. In fact, we have now issued 7 small business surveys and have heard from our businesses immediately after, in fact, the pandemic start, you can see this chart here, or this series of information here, that this was a survey, the first survey done from March 16 to April 10th. You can see the dramatic loss in revenue by our businesses, where over 800 of the 2,000 businesses that responded to our surveys had already lost 90% of their revenues. You can see in terms of closure of businesses that more than half of the business, 57%, had closed their businesses by April 10th. And so we had dramatic loss of business, dramatic closure of business. And of course, we began to wonder if government didn't step in and do something, that we were going to have businesses not be able to reopen. Now, as we were advocating to the federal government to really come down with some relief, we launched a small business grant program. Next slide, please. And the small business grant program was aimed at the smallest of our businesses. And so in fact, we went after the micro businesses, and I'm happy to, because they're the most vulnerable businesses. And we knew that there would be the businesses that needed our help. And in fact, that was true even as the pandemic played out. It happens to be, in fact, also the most diverse set of businesses in our city. 70% of the businesses that responded to the small business grant relief fund was businesses with employees of 5 or less. To date, we have been able to award $5.9 million to those businesses. 52 or 51.9% of those businesses are minority-owned businesses. 48.3% are immigrant-owned businesses. In fact, you see that we have a breakout there in terms of the racial breakdown of those businesses, and I want to just quickly go over that. 12.7% of those businesses that were awarded relief from the Small Business Relief Fund were owned by Black African-American owners. In fact, the city percent of businesses owned by Black and African-Americans are 11.7%, so that's slightly higher than the percentage of businesses owned by Black African-Americans in Boston. 19% of the businesses that were awarded are owned by Asian. That's more than double the percent of businesses that are owned by Asian. And then 14.6% of the businesses that received the assistance owned by Latinx owners, and that's slightly more than the 13.7 that are currently owned by Latinx owners in our city. We then opened a second fund. And the second fund that we launched was really recognizing that the guidance that would be coming out from the state and the guidance that the businesses, small businesses that would reopen would need to follow would come with some financial hardship. So people would have to both buy personal protective equipment for their employees, and they would have to, in some instances, change the configuration of their business to make sure that their employees were safe and the customers were safe. And so in doing that, we said, well, let's try to figure out what small businesses in our city would need to do that. And we launched a fund for $2,000 per small business to allow the businesses to build partitions, move salon chairs, buy special equipment, buy gloves to keep everyone safe, especially as the city of Boston, in all cases, we're mandating protective equipment for workers. And so you see here, we've gotten over 1,200 applicants, but we've only been issuing grants in the stages where businesses are allowed to open. So for any business that's opening in phase 3 or any business that's opening in phase 4, we haven't issued those grants yet, even though we've received some applications for the later phases, because it's not clear what the guidance are for those later phases. And so we've been issuing guidance. We've been issuing grants for the early phase businesses. Next slide. During the COVID emergency period, the pandemic, we've also been and spending money on everything from masks to gowns to printing. And here what you have is a representation on how that money has been spent as it relates to participation of MWBE and other certified vendors. And so 33% of the money of the $17 million that have spent to date as of June 19th, 2020 on COVID-19 related expenses have gone to certified vendors. In fact, we made sure that there was a concerted effort to where we could to find information on who was out there and affirmatively market the opportunities to as many vendors owned by people of color, as many vendors owned by women, as many vendors owned by veterans and so forth. And so we think that that effort yielded some results that we are happy to share with you today of 33%. I'm going to stop there before we go to our next section and ask Selena if you have anything to add to that component, or Emma, if you wanted to jump in before we went to our next one. So I'll now pass it over to Selena to go to talk about capacity building and technical assistance in this space.
Great, thank you so much. As you know from the last time that we were before the council, we launched the Economic Development Center in 2019, and the Pathways to City Contracting workshops and technical assistance that we started providing at that point to help connect local women and minority owned businesses to directly to contracting opportunities. So these are just the events we've had since we last reported to you in the fall. These are ongoing. So we have a few different types of engagements. One is the info session, which is when there is a contract opportunity that's live. We have an info session with the department buyers, and these are open to the public, but we definitely do a lot of outreach to our certified vendors to make sure that they can participate. So we had a lot of success with the snow clearance info sessions that we did for last winter, although unfortunately it didn't snow very much, so that's always something we can't control. Then we had, as you know, the disparity study business outreach meetings, which were really instructive for us to help identify what are some of the barriers that businesses have found with city contracting. And it was good for us to hear directly from business owners that have tried to do business with the city in the past, but also that's getting that's getting captured for our disparity study, because we think that firsthand experience is so vital. And we did these throughout the city. These are just the ones that happened after September, but we had done after October, but we had done 3 prior. The other type of outreach that we do is the opportunity fair. And so the last one we had was in February. You can see a picture here to the left. And that's where, you know, we have our tabling where departments can directly speak with new vendors. This was a really successful session because departments told us they saw vendors that they'd never met before. And a lot of contracts came directly out of this session. So it's good to see that we're going beyond just, you know, the usual folks that participate. And then we launched a new series in March, right before everything shut down, called Contracting Clinics. And the idea with this, and this really came out of our new executive order, but it's to prepare vendors well ahead of a contract opportunity. And so while we do the info sessions once the opportunity is live, you usually only have about 2 to 4 weeks to respond. So if there's some major gap that you have, you're not going to be able to fill it in that time to be competitive for an opportunity. But these sessions help people get ahead of opportunities. And what we do is that we have a department representative go through a typical RFP, because they don't change dramatically from year to year. And so, for example, in March, we reviewed last year's snow removal contract. And so the department buyer goes through the RFP, they point out common pitfalls and just terminology really translate. And we also have our partners from auditing present about what procurement laws are applicable and what the city can or cannot consider when reviewing proposals. So that's just really helpful for people to understand the technical aspects of procurement. We have, so just this year we've had over, and when I say this year, this is, I'm talking fiscal year, we've had over 20 departments participate directly either in an info session, a contracting clinic, or a direct matchmaking event. To the right, you see some of the firsthand testimonials from departments. I want to just point out that for us, every event we do has two audiences. One is the vendors that we're trying to get in and the pipeline that we're trying to build. And the second is a department that can directly do business with that vendor, because we in economic development aren't selecting any of the vendors or aren't directly in that planning phase that departments have when they're thinking of who they're going to do business with. So that, for us, a success is not just that we had the participants show up, but that the departments were there ready to provide opportunities. So this is just to share, some of our largest departments go to every single event that we've had, and they really are taking to this new increased outreach and transparency and opportunities. So now we've moved our contracting clinics virtually. So we had the first one in person in March, but we're going to resume starting tomorrow with the virtual sessions. And these are the topics that we have coming up. So each of these clinics is going to focus on a particular type of procurement that's done in a particular way based on Mass General Law. And so we have architecture and design tomorrow, then we have construction July 16th, and then goods and professional services, which is a completely different process than construction, which is completely different than design and architecture. So we want to encourage you all to help us spread the word. These are very niche opportunities. And so like if you are selling and repairing printers, right, you would only go to one of these, right? You don't need to, we want to really do deeper engagement and not make people have to go to a lot of repeated sessions. And so if you can help us spread the word, we have one tomorrow, and we have a few more coming up. I also wanted to talk about a lot of contract specific outreach that we've been doing. So we have, these are all new opportunities that are fiscal year 20. Actually, one of them starts next fiscal year, where we really focused on these opportunities in terms of outreach to make sure that people were aware of them, or in the case where it was a department that was just requesting quotes, we made sure that the department had a diverse vendor to request a quote from. And so the Main Streets RFP is going to be going to a minority woman-owned business enterprise. I didn't put the contract value because that's not entirely set, but it's a minimum of $50,000. It could be higher. We had a Salesforce written quote contract for our department to help us with our BRJP Salesforce platform. I know the counselors are really familiar with that program as well. And that's going to a minority woman-owned local vendor. The contract value is up to $47,000. The bowling building property management contract is going to go to a minority business enterprise. The contract value is around $3 million. And then we had to assist our public communication and engagement efforts around COVID requirements for businesses and for residents. We engaged with a consultant that does this type of work, and it's a woman-owned business enterprise. And so these are just examples. I know that there are more, and hopefully there will be many more to come, but these were all vendors that are doing business with the city for the first time, I think, for all of them, or maybe 3 out of 4 of them. And they were all areas. So for example, with the bowling building property management contract, we were told that thanks to our efforts, they got twice as many responses as they did last time. And they had many more minority and women-owned businesses apply. And that's really, really important, because if you don't get in there the first time, then you don't learn from the process. And so it's really important that people not just go to these great sessions that we have, but that they actually bid on these opportunities. And if they don't get it, that they use it as a learning opportunity. And for us, it's also a learning opportunity to hear from them what's been challenging or what were roadblocks they faced. We also have a new Pathways to City Contracting Bulletin. This is a monthly communication where we both highlight upcoming opportunities, which you can see over to the right. And we also feature newly certified businesses. So this is another place where we hit our 2 target audiences. So we share this communication with certified vendors and anyone else that signs up for it, as well as our department buyers. So every month they're seeing who's been newly certified or who's newly changed their business type. And it's a good way to continue that 2-way information flow. So I'm gonna pause there before we get into the quarterly spend report to see if there's any questions on the capacity building. Chief Barros,
I think Sabrina, best if we go all the way through, and then we'll go one by one with counselors.
Okay, thank you. So this is just an update on our, let me change the view so I can see the full screen. Our current certified vendor pool, there's a total of 668 unique businesses. The number that are minority owned, you can read it for yourself, versus those that are Boston based. There are some that there's an overlap between some of these categories. So that's why you can't just add all these numbers and get to 668. So that's why we provide the number separately. Then, so for today's presentation, we have, we're going to be presenting on Q1, Q2, and Q3 of fiscal year 20. And for each, we're providing the comparison with the same quarter in fiscal year 19. So you can see I highlighted for you line 9 because that adds together the minority owned and women business owned expenditures, as well as percentages. We had percentage wise, if you look at minority business enterprises, we stayed about even as compared to last year fiscal year. And with women business enterprises, we went down slightly. The total percentage is down from last year from 6.17 to 4.69. And then if you look at, this is the second quarter of fiscal year 20. We went up to 6.22% for the combined number. That's 3.9 for minority business enterprises and 2.9 for women business enterprises. And then you can see we're up from last year, the same time, from 5% to 6.22. And you can also see the dollar amount has gone up significantly. So the percentage is a near doubling, but also the dollar amount is a significant increase for minority business enterprises in particular. And then this brings us to the third quarter of fiscal year 20, where we are up almost twice, almost doubling last year at the same time for the combined minority and women business enterprise expenditures. Sorry, that line should say expenditures, that's my mistake. And then again, looking at the minority versus women line, minority business enterprise went up. This one is more than a tripling of the dollar amount and more than a doubling of the percentage. Women business enterprise expenditures stayed pretty steady at 3.47%, but the dollar amount has gone up, as you can see. So in general, before we move on to the disparity study update, we do see we're moving in the right direction. We're increasing both in percentage and we're also spending more. But we know that there's still a lot more work to do. I also want to point out that for all of these numbers, what we know is that these are the businesses that are certified by us or by the state of Massachusetts. as being women or minority business enterprises. But we know that the inverse of that isn't necessarily the opposite. It just means that the rest of the businesses, we don't know whether they're women or minority owned. And I think we continue to see a limitation due to sort of the certification requirement for us to report to you on these businesses. And so, for example, the Small Business Relief Fund grants that went out, we know from the applications that were submitted that, as Chief Barros mentioned, 51.9% of those are specifically minority-owned businesses. That doesn't even account for women-owned. But only, I think 16 out of 1,600 are actually certified by us, because those are mostly small storefronts, small businesses like those that Councilor Mejia mentioned. They might not be interested in doing contracting with the city or see a value in certification. I shouldn't say they might not be interested, because we think that there's opportunities for all kinds of businesses to be involved in city contracting, but they might not see the value in certification, or it may be too big of a lift given the requirements for that. So we would really welcome your partnership in that to help us figure out how we can get more people into the certification pipeline, or help identify areas where we can make it easier for businesses to complete that, because that's a limitation not just for our reporting, but also for our ability to find these businesses when we want to say, hey, you're getting 3 quotes, one needs to be from a minority-owned business. Well, if we don't have them in our system as minority-owned, then we won't be able to find them, and they won't be able to be included proactively in these opportunities. And so the certification continues to be a challenge in both understanding who we're doing business with and finding those that would be a good fit for opportunities. Update on the disparity study. So we are still on track to complete in this calendar year by the end of 2020. Right now, the consultants are working on business telephone surveys, analyzing workplace conditions, and in-depth interviews. The in-depth interviews are almost complete, and so now they're just doing telephone surveys. And one of the pieces they're doing for that is speaking with people who have held contracts with the city and learning more about their experience and any challenges that they have faced. So now I want to pass it over to Chief Handy to talk about the Equitable Procurement Executive Order.
Good afternoon, members of the Boston City Council. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I will be brief and just give a quick overview of the work that we've been doing in partnership and collaboration with OED to implement the Mayor's Equitable Procurement Executive Order, which was signed in November. There are essentially 3 main categories of work under the executive order that we think really strengthen our baseline of understanding of both what departments are purchasing sort of in real time, as well as what their plans look like in the future, so that we can start linking better together the work that OED does to really strengthen capacity and do outreach to vendors and link that with departmental plans on purchasing. And I think somebody used in their opening remarks the idea of what does that funnel look like? That is absolutely critical to the work that we see happening under this executive order. So there are really sort of 3 things that we are working to do. One is to create a system so that departments are notifying the sort of central approving authorities of how they have reached out to businesses that are certified through their procurement process in whatever way that may be, depending on what type of thing that they are planning to purchase, and making sure that whenever possible that they have referenced our certification lists, so that rather than it being a sort of happenstance and hopeful that they're able to solicit a bid from a certified vendor, that instead we are asking them to proactively reach out as part of the process to identify somebody on the list to solicit a quote from, or to notify of an RFP that is live, or whatever the, as I mentioned, whatever the sort of format may be. And without that initiative, and without contacting OED and talking to them if they're unable to find those folks, we will be sort of working with departments to make them kind of go back to the drawing board and make sure that they've done a little bit more work on that. So we're really trying to add an additional intentional step to procurement to make sure that this is baked into the fundamental plans and how departments move forward. The second piece is some forward-looking planning, certainly into the future fiscal year, but actually probably more importantly into subsequent fiscal years beyond that, because of the sort of cycle of procurements and how it informs budgeting and spending. So as part of the annual budget process, departments will be working with OED and the budget office to really map out what is upcoming, when their procurements fall off, when their contracts fall off, so that OED has a good sense of what's coming down the pipeline in the future and what types of businesses might be those that we sort of don't yet have identified, and can we do some work in the upcoming months or over the course of the next year to really start identifying where we can enhance our lists around those industries. So that's the forward-looking piece. And then the last part is around just really blanketing departments with training. We're working on a partnership with the State Inspector General's office. They do the state compliance with procurement law. And so we will be doing a joint training for all of our purchasers across the city about both how to comply with state procurement law, and also dovetail it with the mayor's executive order, which really overlays on top of state procurement law and adds an additional level of intentionality into our purchasing. I think that's it on this slide. Thanks, Selena. I'll mention this. This is, I think, an initiative that was a long time coming in partnership between Do It and the city's procurement office. It was re-energized with the work of OED and the signing of the mayor's executive order. We now have live on the city's procurement page all of our live bids and RFPs. Business are interested in what types of services can be or goods can be bid on, can go to this page and just get a general sense for what types of things the city is purchasing at any given time, and also can go there to keep an eye for when things, you know, if they're interested in a certain type of opportunity. You know, Selena mentioned doing a lot of work around snow contracting. When it's that time of year, this is a great place to go look and see what are the current opportunities and how do you bid, and it also will be updated with once procurements are awarded, who was awarded the ultimate procurement. I'm going to turn my video off because I have bad internet connection. Great. Selena, do you want to talk about the Certified Business Directory?
Sure, and then I'll hand it back to you. Part of the goals of the executive order were to have a new certified business directory that one that is stable, searchable, easy to find. But the other piece is this is part of the greater Analyze Boston open data approach, where you can find the back end of all of the data here. So you can find the back end of the directory for anyone that wants to pull spreadsheets or information. So it's just a way to have greater transparency. This is still, we're still piloting this, so definitely open to feedback on how it works for you. And this is just for anyone to help anyone that's buying. So this helps internal buyers find certified businesses and also just external parties. We also, I didn't include it in this presentation, but we also just launched a new Black and Brown business directory on boston.gov. And that one's a little different because while it does include our certified businesses, it focuses specifically on those that are Black and Brown owned. They're only located in Boston because our directory has obviously businesses that are not located in Boston, as we reported earlier. But it also has the opportunity for people to add themselves. And so that's a great way for anyone looking to support local businesses with their spending. That's a great directory, but it also helps us identify businesses that may not be on our radar that we should talk to about contracting or perhaps getting certified. And I'll pass it back to Chief Handy for new investments.
Great, thank you. So in the mayor's resubmitted budget, there were actually in the underlying budget submitted in April in combination with the mayor's submitted budget, there were a series of investments that we think are really important to continuing to advance this work. So I would say we're very much still in the implementation phase of the mayor's executive order. But while we are doing that, the investments that were included in FY20 are intended to really, I think, further catalyze the work that we're doing and to support really primarily from the dollars and cents perspective, capacity building with our certified vendors and to be certified vendors. So, taking things out of reverse order, we are planning probably about $1.5 million through some new resources for grants and loans for capacity building. As we work through the details of that process, we will be announcing those hopefully in short order. And then we are adding some additional capacity within City Hall to help us take on this work. So both some strategic procurement work, which will assist in this area around certified vendors, but also just generally around how do we sort of streamline procurement and how do we continue to advance that goal so that it's easier for everybody to do business with the city, which is very important to us. And then we are essentially doubling the capacity at OED to really work directly with small businesses, which is obviously the heart of the work that Selena's office is doing and is incredibly resource and time heavy. And so we would like to put some additional capacity in that office to both work directly with departments to understand what those opportunities are that are coming up, but also to continue to do that outreach and all of the wonderful trainings and communication that Selena highlighted earlier today, and continue to build on that work.
And that is the end of our conversation and our end of our presentation, and we look forward to the conversation.
Great, thank you all so much. We really appreciate your time and your work. I'm going to find the timer feature here so I can set a time. So we'll do 5 minutes per counselor Q&A with the administration first, and then we'll move to our community leaders panel. And I will try to keep mine under 5. Okay. Here we go. All right, here we go. So I want to start with the 33% figure and just make sure we're on the same page about what is being counted as what. Okay, sorry, I'm trying to time on my computer while I'm using my phone for the camera. We had access to this data ahead of time because of the 17F order that the council voted on and that Councilors Mejia and Arroyo and I had submitted. So I went through and just to verify that 33% figure includes the business grants made from the city to businesses, correct?
It only includes 16 of them because we weren't able to certify. Remember, we didn't ask anybody to certify in order to get a grant, or else we would have not been able to get the grants out. So, but 16 of the 1,600, 14 or 16 of the 1,600 businesses that we did provide money to, they actually already had been certified. So that is correct. 16 of them, which is I think only 60,000. If in fact we included all of those that self-identified as minority or women-owned, the number would have been a lot bigger, and then the 33% would have been higher.
Okay, but what I'm saying, just to clarify, Chief, that makes a lot of sense in terms of who's certified in that designation. I hear where you're coming from. I just mean in terms of the denominator for what that, who you're counting. When we think about city contracting, at least how I'm thinking about it in conversations with some advocates, just thinking about not as a one-time grant for relief, but investing in the capacity, getting products and services in return. So if you strip away the grants from that number, the $17 million total figure, it looks like it for COVID spending goes down to about $12 million. And then of that, a large chunk was for the Chromebooks contract. which was with an MBE based in Medford. Is that correct? Called PJ Systems. So I see on that list of MBEs, once you strip away the business grants, that really there are only 3 MBEs total that we're talking about. So the Chromebooks contractor based in Medford, a company called M&M Contract Cleaning based in Brockton, which had the next largest chunk of MBE contracting, and then one Boston-based MBE called RTD Logistics based in Alston. So from my calculations, again, I would love to run this by you to make sure this is correct, but the one Boston-based MWBE that was included in that counts for 1.8% of the total COVID-related spend. If you include Chromebooks, if you take out Chromebooks, it's a little bit higher. It's about 3%. So because the Chromebooks drive so much of it, can you just tell us a little bit about that company? Is it a Black-owned business? Do you have that level of detail, and why did you choose to use just one company for that very large contract instead of multiple smaller businesses?
Yes, so let me just, you're absolutely right. If you take out the small business grants, that number goes down to about 12 million. And so at that point, at 12 million, the MBE spend, in fact, would be closer to 40+%. If you then just look at it, in fact, what's driving that is a large contract, as you said, by one company, one MBE located in Medford. And that MBE is, we bought all of the Chromebooks through. And in fact, that MBE, I believe, is an Asian-owned business. And then you have other MBEs outside of Boston. And as you indicated, I believe, and I don't have it in front of me, but I do believe, Selena, correct me if I'm wrong, there's one MBE in Boston that's certified. So that is all correct, Counselor.
And so it seems like that $5.4 million Chromebooks contract drives the 10% in Q3, et cetera. So great that is with an MBE, but just curious why, if there were Boston-based possibilities and Black or Brown-owned possibilities as well. I'll quickly tick through my questions just because I'm running out of time here. So I was curious on whether data on MBEs is available at that granular level. Black, Latinx, API, as you said, if that's available kind of business by business. Was also wondering if there's any strategies to get the small and local business enterprise numbers up. From my analysis, Boston-based businesses accounted for less than 5% of the COVID-related spending. So curious about that. And then I think my final question for this chunk of time is going to be about the process. So I know at the state, because of the emergency declaration, there are some of the restrictions around how many days certain steps had to take and bidding and all that were relaxed. Was the city under relaxed processes as well?
So I could take a couple of those, John, if you want me to take a few out of order, and then so I'll do your last one first, Counselor. So the procurement law does allow for emergency procurements, which allows you to relax elements of procurement. The sort of guiding principle of that, though, is that wherever possible, you should follow procurement law to the letter of the law. And so it's not like they give you a rule of thumb in the sort of emergency nature that says you can cut this period down by this much or whatever it may be. Basically, the idea is that you just have to sort of do your best within the emergency conditions. And so certainly, yes, we have bought things during the period of COVID-19 where we have had to do emergency procurements. The one example that Selena actually pointed out earlier that I'm more familiar with than others because our office oversees the contract is the public health technical assistance contract. So we bid that very much consistent with 30B, just with shorter windows. in terms of how long we needed to put that out and notice it. And so the steps are the same because we, had a little bit of time to make sure that we could do that correctly. But just the overall timeline is slightly abbreviated so that we are able to quickly turn around and get a decision. And so that's certainly true. I think on Chromebooks, BPS obviously led the charge in terms of procuring those. And so we're probably best to speak to sort of what the other available options were out there. But I do know from a few conversations that were in place at the time that Chromebooks at that time, and I think still today probably, were like hand sanitizer and bleach wipes. They were becoming very, very hard to find very quickly. And so I suspect that what BPS would say is that they purchased what they were able to find on the short window of time that they had in order to actually procure those Chromebooks and get them distributed out to kids. But it's certainly worth sort of asking some additional questions about exactly sort of what was the landscape at that time and were there other options. But just sort of anecdotally from what I had heard at the time, I know that it was incredibly difficult to find contracts, and our jurisdiction as well as other jurisdictions were losing opportunities to get laptops and Chromebooks every day that we waited to get them. So John, do you want to add anything to any of that?
No, I think, Emma, you're right on. I think the only other thing I would accentuate is BPS, I don't believe, issued a special RFP for the Chromebooks. And so they went with an existing contractor because, in fact, the time would have been prohibitive in terms of the restrictions on the supply chain. And so BPS went with an existing contract.
Okay, great. So I think I'm running out of time. All I'll say is I'm going to be, it's wonderful to see the numbers trending up and to kind of get a little bit of the look behind why that is. I'd like to see that 1.8% number go up of Boston-based MBEs as a percentage of the total. And I didn't hear mention of whether the mayor's 2016 executive order, the goals that were outlined there, if we've hit those goals every year.
When you say the goals, Councilor, give us a little bit more.
So in the 2016 executive order, when it said the administration would seek to achieve specific goals based on the disparities that were part of the previous disparity study, 15 to 20%, architectural and engineering, 25 to 15 to 20%, 20 to 25% MBE and architectural contracts under $500,000. 10 to 15% MBE in professional services contracts under $25,000, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, so what we did in 2016, after coming in, was look at a 2003 disparity study and tried to find, in fact, in that study where a great number of the questions were indecisive or inconclusive was the technical term used. We were able to, in fact, highlight some real specific areas where we could list some goals. And the mayor went ahead and list goals. Those were proven to be far too small an area in most of our contracts. So when you list the numbers, a size of the contract, it really takes out most of the contracts issued by the city, and it doesn't allow us to really sort of make those opportunities available. And so. We've listed them because, in fact, we found them, but we look forward to doing a more complete disparity study that will be completed in December and list goals for far more opportunities that we think are realistic than the ones we listed before from that disparity study.
Sorry, so Chief, have those goals been hit even though they're in a far too narrow window of industries? Have we hit those goals every year?
Well, what we can't do is get contracts that small for that kind of work, right? So when you think about the architectural work, the engineering work, we haven't been able to find the opportunities for that.
Okay, I mean, some of these are not under certain amounts. The first one is 15 to 20% MBE in architectural and engineering subcontracts. Anyway, I can follow up offline, but I would love to just see that baked into the presentation because we do have goals on the table. And I haven't ever heard if we've actually hit those any year since then.
Yeah, we'll follow up.
Thank you very much. Okay, so on to Madam President and co-sponsor, Councilor Kim Janey.
Thank you so much. Just checking my sound and video. Everything good?
Yep.
Thank you. And I'll try not to repeat, but I am trying to keep things straight. And it's a little challenging given that I'm participating on my cell phone. So I want to be clear, the time period that we're talking about, I think I heard Q1, Q2, and Q3 for FY20. So are we looking at July 2019 through March, is it March 31 of 2020?
That's correct, Madam President.
Okay, great. And we are looking at the grants around COVID, whether rental relief or, well, the small business relief, as well as the city's normal spend. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Wait, just one moment on that. So we only capture the grants in that one emergency procurement slide, but it's not counted as part of discretionary spend because.
Okay, great, because I did want to get clear what I think I heard Councilor Wu trying to separate out, which was having an understanding of the discretionary spend. And is it fair based on what I heard, just her line of questioning, that we're at 1.8% for MBEs? Or no, did I miss something there?
No, I think Councilor Wu was talking about if you only looked at Boston-based businesses that are owned by brown and Black folks.
Okay, so I would be interested in that number, but I want to know of all of the money that Boston is spending, how much goes to Black businesses owned by people of color? I would like a breakdown of Black. However, so if we looked at, here are the businesses owned, like NBE is the category, businesses owned by people of color. I am interested in also what is the Black spend. I'd be interested in looking at what is the Black spend that is the people of color spend that isn't within the city of Boston. When I see slides here that say minority, is that including women? Or is that a separate slide?
No, when you see MBE, it's minority. When you see WBE, women.
Thank you. Thank you. So what I would be interested in, and I didn't quite see it in my, excuse me. I didn't quite see it in my, in the slide presentation, but I'm interested in just knowing the overall percentages across the board for, you know, how we did on MBE, how we did on WBE. It would be great to understand also the special COVID grants, because I am interested in that money that came, how we did in getting that money. I think I saw some slides that talked about, that looked like it was a little better there, but I would like that kind of specificity. Is that something you guys can answer here?
Selena, you want to just go through that real quickly?
For the grants?
No, not for the grants. I think Council President wants to hear for the COVID spend, right? 33% total, but she wants to break it out. I'm not sure if we have it or if we have to come back to her and talk about the difference between MBE versus WBE.
As well as the discretionary. So I do not want this just to be about the special grants for COVID. I am interested in the much larger spend.
So I can answer the question.
I'm so sorry. My phone is ringing. I hope you can still hear me and see me. I apologize for the difficulty on my end.
We can.
Madam
Okay,
President,
great.
I can answer the question on the discretionary. I have those numbers in front of me. I don't have the COVID spending. So for quarter three, for MBE and MWBE, so that those two things together total the MBE as a total, when we talk about it, the percentage is 7.57%, and WBE is 3.47%. Those, you can't add them together, right? Because there's some duplication, because the WBE includes both WBE and MWBE as well.
Right, I understand. Could you repeat those numbers again? And are we talking about COVID or the overall discretionary?
Overall discretionary for quarter three of 2020.
Quarter three, yep. Say it again.
7.57% for MBE and 3.47% for WBE.
And sorry to jump in, Madam President, just to be totally clear of what's mutually exclusive. So Emma, does that number include the Chromebooks or no?
Yes, yep.
Oh, okay, so it does include COVID spend.
It includes all discretionary spending.
Okay, thank you.
It doesn't include the grants.
Include grants.
Reopening funds, because that's.
And it's 1 quarter.
It's 1 quarter, right? Yep, exactly.
And this quarter compares to the previous quarter, Q2, how? This is, I assume, an improvement that we're seeing increases here? If you're saying 7% is MBE?
It is an improvement. I will have to open the file. Hold on, give me 1 second and I can tell you. So the one thing I just want to mention that Selena just mentioned, which I think is really important, is that grants are not typically counted in discretionary spending. So the reason that we've called grants out today is because they would not typically be captured here, and we don't typically spend the volume of spending that we've directed towards these grants. It's obviously because of a particularly trying time in the city of Boston and trying to get resources where we need to get them, as well as having some federal resources that have helped us do some of that. Sorry, I'm just trying to pull up Q2. I can come back to it if you want, Madam President.
Great. And that's fine. You can come back to it. I'm mindful that I may be running out of time here. And when we're talking about the COVID spend, the grants, that includes the CARES Act from the feds, yes?
Correct.
Yes. Okay. I would be interested in the overall discretionary spend for not just the quarter, how the quarters compare to each other, what the overall is for Q1, Q2, and Q3 cumulatively, a further breakdown of the MBE to really look at Black business, and also to look at where the MBE also intersects with local business, because that's the ideal, is that we're really promoting and supporting local businesses of color in our communities. I am interested, I haven't been able to peel back the onion to see if I think these numbers are real, or that I shouldn't say real, but just to peel back the onion. I would ask though, assuming that, there aren't things that shouldn't be counted in these numbers, what do you account the increase for? So I want to celebrate if there are things that are working, and I want us to figure out how to maximize and scale that up. If there are barriers, I also want to know what you think those are so that we can finally remove those barriers.
John, do you want to take that one, or do you want me to?
Well, there's a series of questions there. I do think, so Madam President, we will get back to you on, Councilor Wu asked and you asked for a breakdown on brown and Black businesses in our certified business pool. And I'm also got here a question on a separation between those who are local, right, and those who are not. And so we'll have to come back to you and we'll get you that information. As to your question of barriers, there are a number of barriers. One of the barriers particularly is in the information that you see here. Once again, we're trying to improve our ability to identify. One of the challenges is the fact that because we don't have stated goals where people can come in and say there is an added value to certifying with the city of Boston, then it is a lot of work to certify. You've got to show us your paperwork. In fact, it's a very legal process. It's one that's been set up by the courts that we follow. And so people choose not to certify with us because they don't need to in order to do business with us. And so therefore we are undercounting the number of businesses that are women-owned and minority-owned that do business with us. In fact, I know businesses that do business with us that are minority-owned, and when I approach them on it, it's like, John, I don't have the time. I don't have the time, and I don't need to in order for us to do business. So that is the major barrier. The major barrier is the city has to increase incentives for people to certify with us. One of the investments that were announced by Chief Hanley, in fact, is the city is going to set up a fund to assist businesses that are looking to do business with the city. We're going to provide loans. We're going to provide perhaps guarantees for surety bonds when needed, but we are going to provide that only to businesses that certify with us. So we are trying to increase the incentives for businesses to certify with us, and we think that this new loan fund will allow businesses, will provide businesses incentives so that they can go through that long process, very legal process of showing us their documents in order for us to certify. Yep.
Thank you so much. And I realize, Madam Chair, that this is it for me. I want to hear from my colleagues as well as the next panel. And I'm glad you brought up certification. As you may be aware, I had some interns last year that worked on this. What other ways can you also support folks in getting certified? And why is our local process so much more complicated than the state process? Don't have to answer that now, but I want to put that on the table because I agree that that is a barrier for folks, is our certification. Anyway, I'm going to mute myself, and if there's a second round, I'll come back for follow-up questions. Thank you, Madam Chair, and looking forward to hearing from other colleagues.
Thank you, Madam President. Next up is Councillor Ed Flynn. And I want to note that Councillor Lydia Edwards has joined us too.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilor Wu. And just wanted to follow up on John's comments. I thought they were informative about the certification process. And relating to that, John, what type of outreach are you doing to these companies that, you're encouraging them to get certified, but how are you doing that type of outreach? Is it, are you doing workshops with them? Are you having conference calls? Give us an idea of what exactly you're doing.
Thank you, Councilor Flynn, for the question. Selena, could you run down the work that I know your office is doing?
Yeah, so in all of the workshops and events that we shared earlier, including the disparity study meetings, we had a component where even though those were listening sessions, we still had our certification manager there. We still had representatives from the procurement office because they also help people become vendors with the city, which is a process by which you can get paid by the city. And then we help them understand how to become certified. And so everything we do externally always has a component around certification. And that's also true for any of our communications that we do. So our monthly newsletter, we always have a plug about becoming certified. I do think that the more that we look up the benefits of certification and how we were able to find vendors and match them to opportunities, that's something that's a value proposition that will be very easy for people to understand. But right now, they need to understand that the upfront investment is worth the effort.
Thank you, Selena, and thank you, John. My next question, I would like to hear a little bit of information on veteran-owned companies, but also I would like to get a little bit of information on women-owned companies, people of color owned companies. What assistance are you giving them with rents as the market continues to increase in terms of, some of these businesses are having a difficult time even staying in that neighborhood or staying in the city. Is that also part of your outreach? So those two questions, and then that's it for me. Again, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Flynn. I want to quickly acknowledge the expenditures with veteran-owned companies. They are at a low percentage, but they are in the reports that we sent in Q1, Q2, Q3 of fiscal year 2020. I'll go to the last quarter. In the last quarter, we spent about 1% of our discretionary funding with veteran-owned businesses. That came out to a total of about $126,000. And happy to, in fact, share with you who those companies are that are certified with the city. And so we'll get you that information, Councilor. On your other question about, why am I drawing a blank? Okay, your other question about rent and how we're helping businesses with rent. We, in fact, established the Small Business Relief Fund for precisely that kind of assistance. The Small Business Relief Fund was aimed at small businesses being able to pay down the kind of expenses that were threatening their existence during the pandemic. Some of it for some people were rent. A lot of it was rent for people, but there were other expenses. Some people chose to pay some of their employees, in fact, to help them out. Particularly those essential employees that needed bonuses, et cetera. So people use it in varying ways, but what was reported to us was that rent was a big expense that people paid down with the money that the city was providing them.
Thank you, Council Wu. No further questions. I do have questions, but I'll ask John further questions offline. Thank you, Council Wu.
Thank you, Counselor Flynn. Next up is Counselor Bach.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess one question I have, and it's sort of a follow-up, I think, on the question that the chair was asking, but do we do an analysis across the board of, okay, the city spends this much of our discretionary spending on like these types of categories, and this is also where we have a real dearth of certified businesses, and is that kind of data and analysis going to drive the additional new investments? So I think about like, right, we look across the board and say how much we're spending on paper, how much are we spending on certain types of construction contracts, how much are we spending on, you know, the architectural services. So I just, and I'm new, obviously, in this role, and I think it sounds like there was some of that category conversation around the executive order, and I'm just curious what analysis we do on that and how it is informing kind of a strategic approach for us.
Yeah, that's exactly the work we're doing with departments as they're planning their spending. As we know what they've been awarded, now we can meet with them and say, well, what are you going to be spending in the next year? And as Chief Handy said, next 3 years, because a lot of these are multi-year. They're planning it out years ahead of time. So we hope to have a semblance of a buying plan. But the other piece is that that's exactly how the disparity study will be broken down. And so they're analyzing contract opportunities versus market availability by each area. So by goods, by services, by construction, by architecture and design. And so we'll have where we'll be able to see where there's really like, wow, there's lots of opportunity here and not a lot of vendors. So yeah, we're looking at it both through the disparity study, but in real time as we're planning our for this fiscal year.
Okay, thanks. Right, because obviously I think it's really important that we, if I think about how economic development could help, right, it's not just helping the departments be better at soliciting the bids, but like fundamentally, how do we create more of these like local Boston, you know, minority Black-owned businesses that are actually in those category spaces. So thank you. And then could you talk a little bit, I guess this is a follow-up on the president's question, because again, I'm less familiar with our certification process. Chief Barros, you made a reference to a court decision. Like, what are the real constraints on our certification process in terms of its complexity? What work have we done to think about simplifying it? Because there's obviously two pieces, right? There's giving everybody technical assistance to get over the hump of certifying and incentivizing them to certify so that it's worth your time. But there's also just the question of lowering the barrier. And I would love to understand like what's really essential about that barrier as it stands.
So Selena, I don't think our certification process is any more onerous than the states, but you could talk better to that because you understand the state certification process better. Can you talk a little bit about the state certification process? I just want to first talk about you know, the court cases. So part of the work that we had were a consultant and the legal firm we hired to do the disparity study is to look at our certification process. Because they're informed by case law, they came in, did a look at it and said, yep, you know, it would stand up in court. And we pushed them on the question, how do we make it simpler? How do we make it easier for people to do? And they really pushed back and said, we don't think you can actually remove any of the steps that you have in your certification process. And so the recommendation we got from the disparity consultants and the legal firm helping them is that our certification would stand up in court and they don't think we should change it. But Selena, can you talk about the comparison with the state?
Yeah, and just to even simplify it more, I mean, basically what we're doing with certification is verifying that the person says who they say the person is who they say they are, that their business is a real business that does what they say they do, and that they're not, you know, that it's not a way of people just, you know, like a white-owned corporation getting business through some front operation. Like that's basically what we're trying to protect against. And so really it's what we ask for is business documentation, tax returns, articles of incorporation, and depending on your business structure, It's simple if you're a sole proprietor. If you're a corporation, it's more complex, but it's really just like uploading documents. The application itself, I think, is 3 pages, and it's literally name, address, phone number, what kind of contracts do you want? And so both the city and the state have pared down their application process significantly. What we haven't been able to get rid of are those document requirements. And those are ones that if we are able to stand up a program that is goal-based, even for our existing goals that we have, if we reserve or if we target a particular part of a contract for, let's say, a woman-owned business, and then it turns out that they're not a woman-owned business, then we're defrauding the program. So that's why technically right now we could do whatever we want because we don't have a lot of strict goals around our program yet, but we want to be able to stand up our program in court, and we're very aligned with the state, and we now have cross certification between the two, so we don't really ask for anything that they don't, and vice versa.
Okay. And sorry, Madam Chair, where am I on time?
You are out of it.
Okay, wait, can I say one thing then? And then
Yes.
but it won't be a question, it'll just be a suggestion. It seems to me like one way of using we've learned a lot, I feel like, in the COVID process through the business surveys you talked about the landscape of our local business. And as you were saying, we've got so many who are not certified, who we think meet these categories. I wonder if the city could use that information to start actively pushing bids out to people, even if ultimately for them to come into the process and then for us to like count them, we would need to certify them, right? But I wonder if we could be casting our solicitation net more widely based on this kind of informal information we have, to at least kind of get people aware of the opportunities and interested in coming in and certifying and applying. So I just wanted to flag that it feels like we should use this additional depth of data that we've gathered in the last few months. But I'll stop there. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Bach. And just because I've gotten a couple text messages from colleagues on the total numbers, I just was able to crunch them based on the data that was sent to us right before the hearing. Could someone first confirm, maybe Chief Handy, if the Q3 equitable procurement data, that spreadsheet with all the company names and amounts, is that just Q3 or is that everything that is live as of Q3? Are we missing, does it include Q1, Q2? Are they baked into there?
So I will confirm because I don't have it in front of me. I need to make sure we're talking about the same file, but I believe what was sent to you is just Q3.
Okay, so first I would love to get all of it when you have it.
Sure. Happy
But
to.
I guess then just diving in, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Happy to get that to you. Yep.
Okay, thanks. So just for colleagues' reference, I think as mentioned in the slide for Q3, it was a little over 10% total MWBE, 7% total MBE. Boston-based MBE is 0.76%. Boston-based WBE is 1.2%. State MBE is 6.44%. And state WBE, and sometimes those are inclusive of the city, sometimes not. State WBE is 2.84%. Okay, next up is Councilor Julia Mejia.
You're on mute, Counselor.
Of course I am. Okay, sorry about that, guys. So I'm just curious about the, in regards to the small business relief fund, how many businesses that receive the fund are still operating as of June?
Council, good question. We'd have to get back to you on that question. I don't have that information.
Okay, no worries. So Chief Barrows, you mentioned that the administration is going to increase incentives to get people to certify their businesses. What is the city, in terms of including set up a fund to help people apply? How much money is going to be going into that fund, and how will that money be spent?
So the true incentives to help people certify will be when we have goals for the city, right? So we anticipate knowing more after the disparity study about where we could have goals, if we can have goals. And so at the end of the calendar year, we would be able to answer that question with more certainty, Councilor.
Okay, thank you. And then I really do appreciate the opportunity to partner on making it easier to become certified, to apply for city contracts. So thank you for that. And I think I've mentioned this before, there's like 43 pages of guides for people just to read, just to navigate the supplier portal. And it's all in English, and it's not accessible to a lot of people. And I'd like to know what kind of outreach the Office of Economic Development has done to get feedback on making the process easier.
Selena, can you talk about the disparity meetings we had with the businesses? I know you put it up in one of the slides, but you know that well.
Yeah, so as part of the disparity study, we had public engagement meetings. I want to say it was 6 total. It's a blur right now, 3 that were since October. And that was really to hear people's experience and challenges with doing business with the city. We offered those, we had interpreters available at every session. We heard a lot of feedback at that point. We also, anything that we do, any kind of event that we do, so those are an example, but also any event that we do, we always have our certification expert as well as someone from procurement, because you're right, the supplier portal, you know, explanation is a lot of like screenshots. That's a lot to get through, but in person, it's really like a 10 to 15 minute conversation. And we often have the computers up, and so people can be registering for the supplier portal live. So we'd be interested in doing a lot more of that and partnering in any way possible. Right now, our greatest need is finding the people that are interested and getting them the information. But we have lots of people at the city that are eager to help them through that process. It's just finding people that are having trouble navigating.
No, thank you for that. What I find to be interesting is that a lot of the conversations that we have, whether we're talking about public safety or we're talking about public health or these, is that it's always the same usual suspects. I'm hearing some feedback, and I don't know if it's if somebody can go on mute. That it's always the same usual suspects that always show up and are applying. And I'm just curious, what are we doing to engage those harder to reach businesses? And that we're really thinking outside of the box of like how we're cultivating these relationships with folks who don't even know how to even that you even exist, right? Let's just really go back to the basics. It's like it's always the same usual suspects that are taking advantage of all the support services that you offer. So I'm just curious about what the strategy is. And when people talk about outreach, you know, outreach can just be sending out an email or putting out something on social media or having the council share. But I'm just really thinking about meaningful and really doing a deeper dive into outreach strategies that bring in some of the folks that are usually left out.
Yeah, we have, so all the things that you mentioned are things that we do. We also have our Supplier Diversity Council that was established when the executive order was signed, and each of those, so we have like Betty Francisco from Amplify, and we have Shagun Irowu from BECMA, who each of them are sort of amplifiers within their own different communities. And so we have that formal body that has 20 some individuals that we also push out information and bring in information from. But then we have an outreach manager that works with community leaders. So everything that we do, you know, and for every leader, it could be a text, it could be a phone call, it could be an email. And I know that that's how we've been able to get a lot of people to come to our events, but always happy to find news sources, radio stations, or whatever it is that can really help us reach even more people. But so far, we have used the channels you said, as well as local media, social media, and then that in-person outreach, which is getting a lot more challenging now.
Yeah, and then I'm also curious in regards to the engagement. You know, there are a lot of activist groups who are out here doing this work. Priscilla is one of our panelists, and we have other folks who have been engaged in this conversation for far too long. And I'm just curious in terms of the level of engagement. You know, at some point we're gonna have to put out, here's what we plan to do, here's how we're gonna hold ourselves accountable to these deliverables, here's the folks that we're gonna engage in the process. You know, has there been some thinking around that level of like specificity in terms of like how you're going to reach your outcomes. Has there been some thought about what the process is going to look like?
I can take that one if you want, Selena. Counselor, I would say on the executive order, which I think we think is really an important foundation, those deliverables and timelines were laid out in the executive order. And, in full transparency, due to COVID, we are a little bit behind where we want to be in terms of those public dates. We are not the full calendar of COVID delay behind. And so I think our measure of success is going to be catching back up as quickly as possible to hit the training deadlines, the form deadlines, the meeting deadlines. A lot of the work has been done already. It's really just getting through that final step of implementing. So we've got a lot of great things teed up in terms of forms for departments and trainings that we worked with the IG's office on. And those are all sort of imminently ready to be rolled out, but we just need to get those across the finish line as we've sort of juggled that work with all of the other COVID response work that we've been doing. In particular, obviously OED and A&F have been heavily involved in that. And you can see that from the topic of the grants that have come up today. So
has there been any
and this is gonna be the last one, Counselor, sorry.
We'll find out. Okay, I'll come back. That's it. Don't worry. Thank you.
Do you want to get one more in? Very good.
Sure, then let me get one more while I got you, because I'm going to be leaving and like at 5:30. So I'm just curious, we keep talking about losing bidders who are informed of their status, and what kind of feedback do they receive on their application for folks who apply and aren't granted a contract? What does that feedback look like, and what lessons can they learn about their process?
Yeah, so that is really something that we want to build out that isn't formalized yet. Our first step towards that is being able to provide past award information through that page that we shared earlier, but that's just a formality so people can see who got it, can I partner with them or can I meet them? But we're trying to find out, work more closely with departments to find people that were close, but something was off in their proposal or their pricing is way off, and actually follow up. And we're going to pilot that with this bowling contract that was just awarded, where there were a couple of minority vendors that were really close, but there was something that they missed in the proposal, so that we can do that live feedback so they can learn from that.
And then just one last thing I'd like to offer is that I think when we're talking about procurement and giving people an opportunity to apply, that I think that what we should start doing is giving a time frame and allowing those harder to engage businesses and giving them the first option, and then we roll it out. So then that way we're really being mindful of those who might have additional challenges, and that the first outreach that we do engages harder to reach businesses, and then after that maybe the usual suspects, and then the ones who have the big bucks. So I think that if you start thinking about it in a rollout where you're giving priority and giving folks who might encounter barriers a longer period of time to be the ones to first apply, then you might be able to level the playing field in that way too. Something to think about. I'll translate,
Counselor.
if you need me to.
Thank you, Counselor Mejia. Okay, so let me see who's left. We have 3 counselors left in this first round of questions. I think others have gone on to other commitments. So I don't see Counselor Sabi George here anymore. Am I wrong? Okay, so then we'll move to Counselor Arroyo next, then Counselor Malley, then Counselor Edwards. Counselor Arroyo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I guess my first question is about system, because I'm hearing a lot about, and it's what I've heard throughout the entire budget process, just kind of what I hear about trying to get more access or outreach to communities of color to bring them into our current contracting process. Is that accurate in terms of what the actual attempts are being made now to kind of diversify those numbers? Is the idea here that we need more outreach?
I would say it's probably twofold, Counselor. I think that's certainly a piece of it, and that's the piece that I think OED is primarily responsible for. There's absolutely also the other side of this, which I think the mayor's executive order was primarily focused on, which is how does the city do this and what types of sort of new interventions or additional layers of thoughtfulness can we add to this to make sure that we are sort of considering both sides of the equation, which is why it's really an A&F OED partnership.
Yeah, because I think for me, I would, my belief is that the process itself is flawed, and that if we're trying to just bring more people of color to apply to a process that continues to create a systemic result, that then we're not actually changing the systemic result itself. We're exposing that process to more people of color. And so I guess for me, the question is, what things have you identified, if any, are barriers to that within the system itself, baked into the system, beyond just the fact that people of color don't have access to that system? What barriers have you identified and intend to resolve within the contracting system itself?
Yeah, I can.
If any.
Yeah, I can speak to a few of them. There's a lot that we're looking at in terms of RFP wording, and making sure that the criteria similar. You see this in the hiring process where sometimes you kind of inflate the requirements, and then you automatically are discriminating against the candidates that are people of color or women or come from disadvantaged backgrounds. So we're looking at that in our RFP process to make sure that all the requirements that are in there are necessary. For example, there was a contract that I was looking at that had like $1 million bonding requirement because the activity was happening within a city building, but the $1 million bonding is only required if you're building a building, not if the activity is happening within a building, right? So it was a very low risk activity that was happening, so you didn't need that level of bonding. So we're looking at, and a lot of these things are just kind of like boilerplate and they get used over and over. So we're looking at what is really essential to perform the task. We're looking at where things can be broken up. We're looking at the supplier portal and navigating that, and is there a way to make that easier? The other piece that we found with RFPs is that a lot of times we have to make sure that we're awarding points for diversity where possible, right? Where, there's some room within existing laws that we haven't fully used in our processes. So making sure that there are credits or points given to local experienced vendors that have what we need. So we are looking at a lot of things internally, and we definitely don't want to just bring people into a process where they're set up to fail.
That's kind of the gist of where I'm trying to get to, is making sure that this process, and I think we're all aligned on that. And so my question on that half is, if we're looking at changing the process itself, not just how we get people to enroll into this process, what barriers are you finding to those changes? Are they changes you can make internally? Are there state laws that are barriers to these things? Are there municipal things that we should know about that we might have to start to dismantle? Or are these just simply political will, internal things in which we're identifying things where we can go further than we have previously, but there's no barrier in the form of law keeping us from doing those things?
Yeah, Council, that's exactly how we're sharing how we look at this. In fact, the biggest barrier we do have right now is in our procurement process. Our procurement that's guided, the procurement rules and laws that are guided by the state laws that Emma referred to. And right now, we think the most important tool we can bring to that barrier will be the disparity study. And so looking at the disparity study as a way to address the way we do procurement, so that we can, and because the disparity study, frankly, is a legal tool, right? If we have disparity, we can do procurement in a certain way. If we don't have disparity, we can't, right? And so that's really the tool that we need to complete and make sure that we can address how we do procurement and stay within the law while we do it.
And do we have a due date for that disparity study?
Yeah, it will be completed this December.
And Counselor, that's time. But if you have, one last question, feel free.
I do. It's about the disparity study, just specifically. What factors is this study studying? Because I think if you just look at the output, it's pretty clear there's a disparity. So what factors are they studying between now and December that's taking that kind of time?
The big piece is the availability, because if we procure with 1% of Black-owned businesses, and there's only 1% of businesses in Boston that are Black-owned. We're at 100%, right? There's no disparity. And so the most complex piece is seeing what the availability of vendors are out there that are diverse, that can perform the types of work that the city procures. And that's what they're doing right now with very detailed business analysis, business surveys, and that's called the availability census. So we already know what we spend. Now we need to understand what we could spend given the market availability.
Thank you. Appreciate those thoughtful answers. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Counselor. Next up is Counselor Matt O'Malley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to keep my remarks brief. I'm having some technical difficulties, but more importantly, I really want to hear from the next panel who waited patiently, and I know have been leaders in this conversation. First and foremost, thanks to you, Madam Chair, and the Council President for calling this hearing. It's a great use of the Post-Audit and Oversight Committee. Obviously, what gets measured gets managed, so this is a great opportunity to check in, and I know this is the first of series of these as it relates to equity purchasing and so many other issues. So I'm grateful to be with all of you. Thank you, Selena, John, and Emma for spending some time with us this afternoon. Obviously, there's some really positive trends to see that you've all highlighted, which is great. I don't want that to get lost, but I think we all agree there's a heck of a lot more work we all need to do. But this is, but I did want to just remark on that, on all of your great works, particularly Selena and John, your great work in this space. That's all for now. Obviously, I got the slide deck and we'll be going over it in more detail and may have some more offline questions, which I'll follow up, but really wanted to thank the advocates as well, particularly Sagun and Senator Wilkerson and Priscilla and so many others who we will hear from shortly. So I look forward to hearing their testimony. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Counselor. And last in this round is Counselor Lydia Edwards.
Hi, can you hear me? I've had issues.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
So just wanted to, I know it's
I
between
think
me
Chief
and the
Barrows,
panelists.
your computer is causing a little bit of feedback. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank
Go
you.
ahead, Counselor.
And thank you very much. So I just wanted to echo some of the questions from my colleagues. Actually, just really one big question, because it seems like the bottleneck is around the certification. And I'm just trying to make sure I understand how you are casting the widest net possible to line people up to get them to get certified. And that is where it seems like, did I characterize the issue at hand? It's the certification or enough certified MB, WBE businesses? Because I'm curious, have you partnered, for example, with the Secretary of State, so that any new LLC that is formed, a corporation, or any new business that has to be built in Boston, right? So have you looked at the addresses on an annual basis of all those new businesses? They have to put their, registered agents, they put where they physically are. Have you partnered with them to just do a massive sweep every year to talk about certification? Talk about MBW, all of those different things. Does that go out on a yearly basis? I know with DBAs, our clerk's office does DBAs on a regular basis. So for any business that files a DBA in our clerk's office, do you currently then on a monthly or annual basis send them information? Hi, welcome to the city of Boston. We're so happy you're going to do business here. For those of you who qualify, this is what certification looks like. This is some information, and this will help. Do you do either of those things right now?
So what we're looking at, we have the partnership with the state certification office, which has helped us really understand a little bit more about who we're doing business with. The other piece that gets at what you're saying that I think might be a more precise tool is that everyone that signs up through the supplier portal, so that's everyone that is interested in doing business with the city, and now every procurement is electronic for the most part, except for construction, and so they have to go through the supplier portal. There's an interface there where you can select if you are minority owned or women owned. So now we're mining that data because the way that it's presented, it's not something you have to select, and it's not very clear what you're selecting. And so we know that there's some false positives in there, but that is actually what we think is our strongest pool, is people that have gone through and said. And then our second strongest pool are people that that departments know. We do business with them. We know who the ownership is. They're not certified, and helping those folks become certified and reaching out to them. So those are the two pools we're looking at, but we're open to new ideas. And I know the clerk's office we've thought of as well. But the Secretary of State's office, I think, is another great place to look for folks.
I understand honestly. I understand honestly that the issue is that the certification in the pools might be at one aspect of it, but I do think that it's worth partnering, because assuming people know enough to approach the city of Boston, feel confident enough to approach the city of Boston saying we're interested in your business is one thing. And for a lot of businesses, there's a lot of preset notions of who even should be working with the city. So I have, folks who have really small micro businesses, they wouldn't even think to get into that portal. So I think you're still starting too high in terms and too narrow in the net that you're casting. I do think partnering with the Secretary of State, again, in order to have a business, unless you're a sole proprietor by yourself, you have to file with the Secretary of State. It's electronically filed. And so if there's a way to partnership, either so that they direct them towards your portal for those interested in the city of Boston, for all those with the Boston address, or if you are willing to, on an annual basis, because I understand what legwork it would be if you did it every month. Businesses can be born every single day, but on an annual basis, sent out to those with Boston's addresses, an information packet of how to do business, best practices. I can tell you honestly, even small businesses sometimes have no idea how to orient and move around City Hall. So, I mean, a welcome packet that also included this, I think would be a huge push towards making the city of Boston, especially the way city government operates, more welcoming to a lot of people. It's really frustrating for folks because they feel it's still who you know or how you can navigate or who can get you in through. And so I would just really suggest that if there are, in order to exist as a business, any business that exists in Boston, we should know and have a touch with. And there's one place where they all got to go.
And that's time, Counselor.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm moving everyone because there are some
I
time
appreciate it.
constraints for the panel. So I want to try to get to the panel by 5 p.m. sharp because some folks have to go. So did anyone want to respond to Counselor Edwards' last comment? And then we will actually go to Counselor Sabi George, who is back and now back to her part in the queue.
Well, I just wanted to thank the Counselor for that comment. We were going to follow up, Counselor. We'll get back to you on the Secretary of State's process and see if we can inject ourselves in that.
Thank you. Counselor Sabi George?
Sorry about that. No, I had to jump off. I'm tuning back in, so I'm just listening. I don't have any questions at this point. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So then I know so if any counselors have a second round of questions for the administration, could you please raise your blue hands on the participants tab so I know, and we can then get a sense of if the administration needs to stay for more time or not. They've already been incredibly generous with their time. But for now, I'm going to take the liberty. Okay, so I see Council President Janey has something, but I want to make sure we get at least a statement in from Shagun because he has a time constraint and will need to run.
Yeah, I don't want to take time for questions. I would like some follow-up on the disparity study. I didn't get clear where we are in that, so we don't have to do it now. I'm happy to go right to the panel, but I want to raise that because it keeps coming up and I didn't get to do that in my first round. We can go straight in, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Madam President. So we will now, I do not see any blue hands anyway. So thank you so much to the administration. We're grateful and we will follow up for sure. So now we'll go to Shagun Idowu from BECMA, and then Shagun will be followed by Senator Diane Wilkerson, Ms. Priscilla Flint Banks, and Haris Hardaway.
Good afternoon, President Janey and Madam Chairwoman, Councilor Wu, other committee members, and honorable city councilors who are joining us this afternoon. I appreciate your invitation to participate in this hearing on docket number 0390, order for hearing regarding equity in the city of Boston. Particularly, I want to thank you, Councilor Wu, and President Janey for sponsoring this hearing order, bringing us back to this table to have this conversation again, and your continued advocacy in this space. I also thank Chief Barros and Selena and Ms. Handy for your comments today and the presentations. Unfortunately, we weren't able to see all of this data before today, and so we'll be spending some time reviewing what was shared and sharing more of our thoughts later. I was taught to give credit where due, so I want to commend you for, or at least the mayor, for increasing the capacity of economic development. One of the recommendations we made last year was about boosting the office, particularly of Selena Equity and Inclusion. So happy to hear that more money has been added to that department. We'll hope that that capacity leads to progress in this area. Also want to congratulate the city for getting to whole numbers when it comes to contracting with minority businesses. Again, it's funny because while I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak to all of you, I have to apologize at the outset. I was going to prepare written remarks, which of course I'll do after this, but when I was reviewing the remarks that I gave 424 days ago, May 2nd of 2019, for a hearing on the equity in city contracting, I realized that I might be committing plagiarism because of myself, because I'd be delivering some of the same remarks that I gave a little more than a year ago. But the good thing is that it means that I'm not going to have to reiterate one of the points I made then, which was about the availability of particularly Black-owned businesses in the city of Boston and throughout the Commonwealth. There was a comment made that were a little difficult to find, but one of the things about the recent interest in Black businesses, in particular as a result of the revolution that we see happening outside of our doors, is that we now know that there are plenty of Black-owned businesses across the city of Boston, with all of the lists that are now available. Particularly the Boston Business Journal just put out a list of minority businesses, about 102. 45 of them are considered Black-owned and located in the city of Boston, and together produced revenue of over $100 million in 2019, and alone employ about 1,000 people from the city of Boston. So we know that there is an availability of Black businesses. These businesses were not only in the food services or contracting industries, but they covered a wide swath. So we'll look forward to them being included in future contracting opportunities. In an April hearing for Docket 0584, order for a hearing regarding planning for an equitable recovery from the impacts of COVID-19, I mentioned that over 60% of our members, of more than 300 of our members, indicated not having reserves to last up to 90 days, which could result in their permanent closure. I also mentioned that the Center for Responsible Lending showed that 95% of Black businesses across the nation did not gain access to the Paycheck Protection Program. And just last week, there was a national report released that showed that, or that indicated that 41% of Black-owned businesses have closed their doors as a result of COVID-19. Again, we'll acknowledge the city's efforts to provide grant funding to minority-owned businesses overall. Yes, I think it was mentioned, I was taking notes during this as opposed to having prepared remarks, and that might screw me up in the end. But I think it was 12% to Black businesses, which is okay. Of course, we want to see those numbers increased as more money is available to this grant funding, this grant pool. But one thing that Senator Diane Wilkerson has said, who I know is going to speak next and who I'm very much looking forward to her comments, she has said repeatedly, and which is true, that whatever the numbers are for small businesses overall, whether it be in the nation or here in Massachusetts, in terms of how many will close, you can double or triple that number for Black business. This is not alarmism, but this is rather a prognostication and rather a correct one that we see coming to fruition almost every day here in the city. But I'm not going to have to reiterate all these things that I said last year, that I've said at other hearings, that I've made in public, because the body knows the numbers, the administration, I assume, knows these numbers too. And so while these figures represent the scale of the problem on the national level, we cannot afford to replicate them on the local level. And so a couple of recommendations that we have, which I will warn in advance are not new, but rather recommendations that we would love to see implemented, a commitment to making them happen. So one is in the area of reporting. I mentioned this on May 2nd, 2019, mentioned it in a meeting with the mayor on recommendations that the administration should take. I mentioned it again today, that the Office of Economic Development must abide by existing legislation, which was mentioned earlier from 2017, report on their numbers on a quarterly basis. It should not take the council prodding to receive this information, nor should it take the public needing to file requests in order to receive what is public information. We know that the numbers are not great, but this is not a reason to hide them. 2 weeks ago, the mayor declared that Boston would be a lead in racism. Part of that effort includes the city naming and acknowledging and therefore facing its failures as a result of systemic racism, not burying them in press releases or combining certain categories to mask the true numbers. For this reason, it's important that the data be disaggregated. This point was brought up by Councilor Janey for bringing up this point, that in review, that we need to identify not just minority business, but Black-owned business, Latinx-owned business, et cetera, in order for us, particularly organizations like BECMA, like Amplify Latinx, to know what work we need to do for our members and for our community to ensure that we're connecting them to sources that were discussed earlier by the administration. In reviewing information from last year's hearing, while minority spending was around 0.65%, and again, this is based on the numbers that were available then. I know that the city added subcontracting numbers later on, but we don't have that data. That's not available on the website. While minority spending was around 0.65% of this information, only 0.5% of this spending, which translated to a roughly $300,000 out of the $660 million, went to Black-owned businesses that we identified. And this is out of the 11 of Black-owned businesses that I'm happy Chief Barrows was able to specify today. So we want to know specifically, again, what Black businesses receive, Latinx, et cetera, as well as all the other disadvantaged categories. We know that a lot of the data shared today, we weren't able to review the data shared today. It was not available before this, so we weren't able to analyze, and therefore we can't, either congratulate or push the administration to do better when it comes particularly to Black-owned businesses, because it must be noted, minority-owned does not mean Black-owned. It just means non-white. And so, doing great or pushing these numbers up to 7 or 8% for minority businesses does not mean that Black and brown communities are getting more of the pie. It just means that anyone who's not white. And so we want to know how we're doing when it comes to all that we contribute to the city. Second is goals. So I know that the Chief Barrows and Selena and others have talked about the disparity study, and pertinent and important questions have been asked about that. As an organization, BECMA is going to continue to advocate for the fact that the city has to set goals with or without this disparity study. Last year, we recommended a goal for spending of 10, 15, and 20% over a three-year period for Black-owned businesses. We can certainly increase those goals for minority-owned, knowing that even though we might make up 11% of the businesses, and would love to see the data on this because we've been looking for that. We know that we can hit these goals knowing all the industries that we're in and the output that we do per year. And certainly we know that there are not 90% white-owned businesses, and yet that's what we keep getting when it comes to contracting. So I think we can hit these 10, 15, and 20% goals over 3 years. If the city can't set goals legally, they need to set benchmarks or use some other lofty legal language to help us achieve not only whole numbers, but double digits based on the population size of Black folks in the city of Boston. But not only setting these benchmarks, but we need to tie them, whether they're goals, benchmarks, whatever word you want to use, we need to tie them to promotions, wage increases, et cetera, for employees who are responsible for contracting, or else it will not matter what policies we put in place. If someone's job is not on the line for hitting these goals or benchmarks or other word we decide to use, then it will not matter. And we will continue to be here every single year talking about the lack of equity in city contracting. One final is partnerships. So last year, the mayor established, Selena mentioned this earlier, the Supplier Diversity Advisory Council, which BECMA has a seat on. The intent of this council was to begin connecting disadvantaged businesses to contract opportunities. And I've already shared this with Barrows and the Office of Economic Development, but we have to actually use the council for the intended purpose. So currently, how it operates is that we receive information to share with our members and other folks in our community, rather than actually participating and shaping and building programs from the ground up. So this is why, we get one program or one press conference or one executive order after another every single year that falls flat and continues our lack of progress in this area. Many advocates and nonprofits are doing really important work in this space. LISC, Boston, Amplify Latinx, the Foundation for Business Equity, and I can go on, many of them on the council. But the city needs to use its power to convene these organizations in order to create alignment between them, and not continue to force itself into an already crowded space to achieve symbolic wins that last as long as a Globe headline. And other recommendations that come directly from our members, as I checked in with a lot of folks before this hearing, other recommendations include, again, what I shared last year, which we have not seen happen on an adequate level since then, breaking up large contracts, something we've not seen done particularly in major departments like the Boston Public Schools, improving notification process. Right now, I think Councilor Mejia just brought this up, or maybe it was, no, it was Councilor Edwards that just brought this up about folks still feeling like you have to know someone to know something that's going on in the city. A lot of our members continue to report that they feel like they have to be on some secret list to be notified of upcoming contracts. And not only to find out, but then when they do, there's a very short timeline to respond to those contracts. So again, this comes from, Councilor Mejia brought up outreach efforts. Again, this has to go beyond the current efforts. But again, if we're included from the beginning, then I think we're able to make our folks aware. And, the city can play the role rather than hosting its own events, of instead partnering with members of the advisory council, others who are not on the advisory council, who already hold events with their members on this issue, and presenting this information or utilize in that way, as opposed to creating these external events that we then have to push our members toward, that sometimes may conflict with other things going on. So I think using existing organizations for that reason will be important. And finally, Chief Barros mentioned earlier that the city is going to be working to increase incentives to become certified. And again, Councilor Edwards brought up that this is one of the bottlenecks, and this is true. A couple of our members have talked about this. And so creating a loan fund or some kind of fund to help people get through the process. For us, the biggest incentive to get folks to become certified is to give business to the people who are already certified. Word travels fast, and word is greater than any loan or grant monies to get people to be certified. If at hearing after hearing, whether it's ones I've been at or watched online from when Congresswoman Presley was a counselor, from when Charles Yancey was a counselor, from Chuck Turner when he was a counselor, we can go all the way down the line of watching these hearings from the 90s on down, where business owner after business owner, Black business owner, talk about not getting business. And so this goes down through the generations, through these decades of the understanding being that if you were a Black business owner, you were not going to receive a contract. And so the way you turn this tide is not just by certifying folks, but by giving people a reason to be certified. And that is by the existing pool of certified Black businesses, making sure that they are getting lucrative contracts, not these one-off $10,000, $5,000 contracts, but lucrative multi-year $1 million contracts that we see others who are out of state, who are not people of color, getting these contracts on a continual basis. And so all I'll say is that, last May, Black businesses were in a precarious position. Today, we're in an impossible one. It is not enough to move the needle inch by inch on this issue. We have to knock it down. In the 21st century, we cannot and will not settle for horse and buggy paced progress. If this mayor is committed to making Boston a leader in defeating racism and listening to Black people, assuming he is included in his comments on white people not speaking but listening, then here is where he can lead, by addressing the woeful economic conditions in Black communities. Earlier this year, McKinsey & Company reported that if we were to close the racial wealth gap, we would add $1 to $1.5 trillion to the economy. Part of this wealth is added due to the growth and sustaining of Black businesses. This is where the mayor and the council can lead. On top of today, we have hearings worth, administrations worth, decades worth of recommendations from Black leaders. None of them are new. All it takes is an actual commitment to following through on them, so that in the future, hearings of this nature, we can celebrate successes rather than continuing to point out the agonizingly slow forward movement being made. So again, I appreciate your invitation to to present today. And all I'll say is that, we look forward to understanding what is behind some of the increase in these percentages so that we don't confuse motion with actual progress and understand what's working so we know how to sustain it on a continual basis. So thank you all very much.
Thank you very much. Next, we'll go to Senator Diane Wilkerson.
I'm going to warn everybody right now. I have my grandma T-shirt, my grandma Disney T-shirt on today. This is my house meeting attire. Good afternoon, Council. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Wonderful. I want to start by saying thank you to you and to the Council President for your steadfast focus on this issue, which I would, and all of the other councilors that are on the line today, I'm actually excited that I get to go after Sagan, because I knew that he was going to lay out facts that were so important. But here's where it is for me. I think it's also important that he was, in all of the testimony, the first one to mention directly and discuss the issue of race and the implication that it has on this entire process, probably more than any other that we discussed. So I can hear something in the background. Let me say this. Council President Janey, in her initial remarks, said something. I wrote it down so that I would not forget. She said that the city of Boston, if we are serious about delivering any of what the mayor said 3 weeks ago, must radically change, shake things up in the city of Boston and move in a different and a bold way. I could not agree with her more. So I'm going to use my time just to talk about very specific experience, because I think it says everything about where we are. In the month of April, I think Sagan talked about that. I was also participating in that city council hearing to talk about what's next and what's going to happen with this city that was dealing with a pandemic that 6 months ago none of us could have anticipated. We knew then that the state of the economy and the health of our community of people of color. And when we talk about that, we always want to be clear that we're talking about Black and Latino people. Why? Because we make up like the majority of this population when we talk about people of color. It just so happens, ironically, that we also happen to be, now we know, 63% of the total population of communities of people impacted by the COVID-19 virus. Those things are so inextricably connected. And if we are going to have a conversation about the economy, we have to acknowledge that piece. So I want to start there. I got involved in April with a whole group, a coalition of different organizations, nonprofits, individuals who were concerned that given the city of Boston's history on bungling it when it comes to dealing with race, that we needed to be clear at the outset that there had to be an advocacy around what's going to happen as we were embarking on what the unknown territory called coronavirus to not only our residents, but also to our businesses. What was going to happen with Black and Latino businesses who, as Sagan said, we started off this process in March, knowing that we were circling the drain with them, that they were doing business at less than 1%. And so this coalition, the Black Boston COVID-19 Coalition, got together and in April of this year sent a letter in the first week that we gathered to the governor of the Commonwealth and to the mayor of the city of Boston, asking for, among other things, a plan, an idea on what and how we were going to make sure that our businesses didn't shutter forever in this new environment. What kind of spending we were going to undertake, what was the plan to make sure that Black and Latino businesses got their fair share of opportunity in that spending. And to both, as I said, to both the governor and to the mayor. So I'm fast forwarded to today on June 29th. I am, as Sagan said, delighted to see the report. But the fact that we've never received an official answer from the city to that request says everything about what is wrong with how we operate. That we as citizens have to plead and beg and cajole and sometimes threaten, and then finally just give up and go around the other way. So, we ended up getting the little bit of information that we had from the city councilors. no understanding of why that information was not made available to us as residents of the city. Not just because we're entitled to it, but because, as Sagan said, we also have some level of expertise being on the ground and working with BG, and who stays on top of the Boston Employment Commission and the Nonprofit Directors Network, who the Black Directors Network, and specifically working with the folks who dealing with the food and the food deserts and the food gaps that we are dealing with. So all of that is at play. And the fact that we could not get a response to that question, those questions, says it all. So I'm gonna I'll go to the next point. And this is really for the counselors that voted voted yes. I would say voted yes last week. And that, what did we vote yes to? Because we are in a pandemic still. We are in a pandemic on racism very much still. And with all of the discussion by many of you, in fact, about what we need to do as a city of Boston, the people like me who are on the ground, we recognize clearly that a lot of the hope that we had about what the mayor said 3 weeks ago and what we know has to happen for a real dismantling of systemic racism process, those hopes were dashed last week to the extent that we were told would have been nice to be able to do it, but we're going to have to put that on hold for right now. So when you freeze the budgets on it, then you, in large respects, have frozen the conversation and the opportunity for advancement. And so here's what I would say. If you think about this as a city, we spend so much time talking about the 1.8% or the 2% or the 5%. The reality is that none of you can be satisfied with the fact that average 95 to 98% of all of the money that you spend, that you approve, that you sign off on, that the city spends, goes to white businesses in a city that's 55% people of color. And to me, that's really what it boils down to. This is not about certification. It's not about technical assistance. Of course, there are businesses that need help trying to get in the door. But the reality is that we figured out as a city how to give 99% of the business to people who don't have to get certified. So to me says that you could figure it out for the folk of color if that was the focus and attention. The bottleneck is right in that building. The bottleneck is in those departments. The bottleneck is even in Nubian Square, because when I looked at the report, the 17F report that Councilor Janey and Councilor Wu allowed us to see, what was so disheartening is that purchasing was done across every department. I saw public works, I saw parks, I saw the school department, I saw the police department, I saw the fire department. And so nowhere in our city process is there somebody sitting in that room saying, wait a minute, how can this be? How can it be that we have a city that looks like this, but a purchasing process where all of our money goes that looks so different? And you guys, to me, that's the bottom line. The reason we fight for Black businesses to get business from the city is because they hire Black people. The reason we fight for Latino businesses to get business from the city in which they live, the government in which they live, the government that collects their money, that spends our money, is because we know for a fact that they hire Latino businesses. So here we sit, drive down Blue Hill Avenue, drive down Warren Street, drive down Washington Street, and you begin to see what we know is going to be devastation, because a lot of those businesses are not open yet, and they're not going to open. They're not going to open. And there's a whole host of reasons why, but much of that is that they never had the opportunity when they were open that others do to access. I've said so many times that we're putting much too much stock in the value and import of a disparity study. I had the privilege, and I call it that, to sit in the governor's office in 1984 and 85, when the Supreme Court ruled on the Croson case that set and established the need for disparity studies in order for city councils and governments, local and federal and national, to be able to support set aside and goal programs. They had to have a disparity study. I sat in the Parkman House in 2003. And Councilor Flaherty, I know that you will recall this, because you know that when the city decided to disband their MWBE program, the Democratic National Committee threatened to pull the very national convention out of Boston that was coming in 2004. I'm listening in now, and I'm watching what's happening. I have been very clear. I will tell you, I sat in the State House, sat in the Parkman House. I've never been asked, because that's not how this city works. We work on petty politics. If there's a perception and that they don't like you, they don't ask you questions, and the community suffers. We see it in the city council dynamic. We see it in the day-to-day dynamic and how we deal with as citizens. The reality is that the focus should not be on just volume. The focus should be on the numbers. And if you look at the numbers that were provided in that 17F report, 90 days of COVID-19 spending, which meant emergency declaration spending, which means a abbreviated or certainly an alleviated bidding process, right? We found 2 Black businesses to do business with. That's a fact. That's not my numbers. That's what your report says. How sad and absolutely outrageous is that? The fact that you could have one business that does $10 million and then say we should have a victory over that, which is the point that Sagan was making, is what is so dangerous here. There are 2 identifiable Black businesses. I don't even see a Latino business on the list. And I say I don't see it because it could very well be. There could very well be one. I don't know. What I do know is that I see 2 Black businesses. 2 Black businesses in a process where outside of a bidding process, what happens is the city needs masks. The city needs masks. The city needs sanitizers. The city needs to do cleaning. Those kinds of things that we knew were going to be needed in a pandemic. And in all around the world, we were able to find 2 Black businesses. And like I said, from what I can see, no Latino businesses. That's what you have to deal with for the members of the council. Are you satisfied with that? That somehow an average of 95 to 99% of this almost average $650 million that we're spending on an average basis. What is the decision-making process that goes on in that building? When it gets to the bottom line on that table and the procurement director, or whether it's for the city or BPS or all of the departments that have to spend money, when they have to make that decision, what is it that is keeping us from giving any opportunity to the very people who we all have been talking about being our essential workers, our essential business, our essential community for the last 90 days? That's the question. A disparity study, I'm going to start with this one. The purpose of the disparity study, and I think Selena said that, is to document availability. So it will tell you that 3% of the plumbers that we have in the city are Black or Latino. 6% of the architects. That's the sole and only purpose of a disparity study. It's not magic. It's not something you can go and wave at people. This whole, we're going to have a disparity study. That's not what it is legally designed to do. It has one purpose, and that is to tell you what is available. Now, here's Boston's problem. For at least the last 7 years, we know we have not been able to get past 5%, 4%, 2%, 1%. And one by one, we saw Black businesses and Latino businesses die. We have less contractors today than we had 10 years ago. We have less architectural firms than we had 10 years ago. We have less plumbers, less electricians, less PR firms, all of it, less media firms. So if you're counting today and you use that number to freeze what is available, that means the goal will be 1% of plumbers, 2%. So be careful about what you wish for, because this disparity study is not a panacea. It's going to freeze us in a place because of the lack of activity and real opportunity that the city of Boston has provided to Black and Latino businesses for the last 7 years. In fact, it's going to freeze those numbers at an abysmal rate that we're going to have a hard time getting past, because we don't do well in hitting goals. If you set a goal at 2%, that's what you're going to do. If you set a goal at 5%, we'll never get past that. And we'll be 95% of the business we'd be doing will still be with white businesses if we don't do something, as the city council president said, that's radical change, shake it up, change things up. Like when you have an emergency declaration and you suspend the bidding process, you get to call RDT Logistics, the company in Austin that provided those masks. We should have in this 90 days been at 90% people of color because of the COVID spending. And I don't know where the federal dollars are in this process, but instead, what I saw was a report that the city provided that had small business grants and the same report as the business of purchasing the laptops. The last time the city did a major report, they put the spending in the same report as monies, as grants they gave to community development corporations. We're not stupid. We ask how much dollars you spent contracting, doing business with Black and Latino people, not grant making, not the fund money, not the money you give away to nonprofits, but doing business and contracting with people who hire people who can be at work in our community. We're now poised for 80% of the evictions in this city that are going to start popping off at the end of July and into August are going to come from communities of color. We're talking about a third pandemic, and nothing that we've done today is going to prepare us for that because we're still trying to nibble around the edges. We need to do something bold. You all should be ashamed of the numbers. The city should be ashamed of the numbers because you guys are the ones who are statutorily responsible for making sure it works, and doing the enforcement and being the check and balance. But in the process, in an environment where you had an opportunity to do something without the bidding process, to call up, we still couldn't get past 5 or 6%. And if you really get down to Black and Latino businesses, I'm not sure we're past 2%. That's the shame of it. We can do better. There are ways to do this, and it has to do with the decision-making process when it's final on that table. So I appreciate Council President Janey said at the beginning, I hope we're going to talk about things we can do and not just laying out the problem. You've got not a problem, you've got a crisis here because we have a whole community on the verge of economic devastation when those businesses are never going to open, when people start to get evicted in the ways that we see. And so you can stop that. You must stop that. There are ways to do it. How about talking to people being one? Talking to people who know a little bit more about this than you all might know might be one of the ways to do that. Having commissions whose job is to give you suggestions based on their experience versus sitting in a room and listening to what you tell them that you want to do. That's not a commission or a task force. That's what the city of Boston does right now. We can do better than this, guys. Councilor Wu, I thank you for the opportunity to speak. Obviously, like I said, I'm emotional about this because I see what's coming here. We are going to have 50, 60% of our businesses, Black and Latino businesses, the doors are going to close because the $2,000 grant was not enough. And it's very much appreciated. I appreciate the fund money, but that's not how we keep businesses alive. We keep them alive by doing business with them. And in the city of Boston, with all of the energy, when I think about all the study and the work that you all have done, this has been incredible listening to you today, because what it says to me is there's a lot of energy being put into a city, into this by the city council, by the mayor's office, by the Walsh administration. And to all of this, it got us to 5% or 2%. What does that say? We need to be rethinking this. We need some bold action, and I'm counting on you all to do it. And I thank you, Councilor Wu, for the opportunity. I'm going to stop there. You know, I could talk for a while about this. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Senator Wilkerson. Yeah, we love every word. So now we'll move on to Ms. Priscilla Flint Banks. And then, okay, I see Haris is back. So Haris will be after that. And then Brother Lowe. So Ms. Flint Banks.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Councilor Wu and Councilor Janey, for inviting me to testify. As you all know, most of the people on this call know that we as the Black Economic Justice Institute, we have been fighting for years around the Boston Resident Job Policy, procurement. It's, you know, it's really sad that what the numbers are. It really is. I mean, it really doesn't make any sense. And I really believe that we need to work together. The city council need to work with the community activists and the people that are out on the streets every day. We know what's going on. Since this pandemic, the Black Economic Justice Institute, along with the Black Boston COVID-19 Coalition, has been able to give out over $50,000 worth of gift cards and laundromat cards and masks to our community. We are suffering, and we've been suffering. We were suffering before the pandemic. We've been suffering for years. And sometimes when we come and we talk to city officials, we get a lot of talk and no action. And that's what we need now. We need action. I heard Selena talk about, the outreach. You all's outreach is horrible. I'm sorry. And then to mention about radio stations, I have came to you all and talked to you all about doing work or advertising or sponsoring our radio show so that we can get more people involved. People know us, the Black Economic Justice Institute. They know that we are out here in the streets and we do the best that we can to work and support our community. And now we are not only do we have a health crisis, we have a racial crisis, we have economic development crisis. We are in bad shape here in Boston. And it's sad that we have 7 women, 6 people of color, and we still couldn't get a no on that budget. So I want to thank the people that did not pass it, because if there's going to be change and there's going to be real change, then something needs to be done with that budget. And so first of all, I didn't really want to go behind Senator Diane Wilkerson, but that's okay because she said a lot of the things that I've been feeling. We've been working together with the Boston Black COVID Coalition, and we've been able to get some things done. And we're going to continue to fight. We're going to continue to do this work until things change in the city. So that's what I want to say. And we will be reaching out to have a meeting with John and Selena, especially around the BIJP, because there's really clearly issues with that. And so as a community activist, as a Black woman born and raised in Roxbury, I'm tired. I'm sick and tired of all of this. And I'm angry. I'm frustrated. I just buried my mother in April because of COVID. I'm tired of this foolishness. We need to come together and come up with a plan that's going to benefit all of us and not just white people. I'm sorry. We have to come up and do something better for ourselves. And so I get angry and I get frustrated, but I am who I am. I love my people. I really, really do. And I'm tired of seeing us suffer because it doesn't have to be like that. The city has millions. The state has billions. And what do we get? Crumbs from the table? We're tired of crumbs. We want pies and cakes and everything too. We don't want pieces no more. And we don't want crumbs. And so I'm just, I'm glad you all asked me. You may not ask me back, but that's okay. But I have to speak from my heart because this is real. This is real. We ride up and down the streets and we see our people and they are hurting. They are hurting. You want to make it mandatory to have masks, but where the masks coming from if people don't have the money to get the masks? You all been around for a long time. You all ain't new to Roxbury, Dorchester, Mattapan, Hyde Park. Well, you're not new to this. You all know what's going on. We need to make change, and we need to make change now, because what's going to happen when this COVID is over? We're going to be on another Zoom call talking about the same old thing. So that's all I have to say right now. And I really appreciate you all. I appreciate all the work that you all do. But like I said, I'm not happy with the budget because you all can control that. You all could have went back to the mayor and said, no, we don't want, let's try. I ran the payroll for the city of Boston for over 20 years. And there's no way that people are going to lose their job if the budget does not get passed, because the money just don't disappear. The money's still there. So, there's a whole bunch of stuff that's going on that is not right, and it needs to stop.
Thank you, Ms. Flint-Banks. And next up is Harisse Hardaway.
I guess. Hello. See if you guys can see me.
We can't see you yet, but we can hear you.
All right, wonderful. We'll start there. I just want to thank Councilor Wu and Madam President for the opportunity to speak today, and greetings to all of the councilors and our friends there in the Office of Economic Development. We really are here to talk about the businesses from Nubian Square, Roxbury Main Streets, and their access to contracts with the city. It hasn't been something that we can do all the time because it's about access, and we don't get that access. It seems like we're speaking a different language many times, and we don't know how to navigate. And I do see the efforts by the Office of Economic Development to do fairs, which people in our community have participated in, and it's just starting. For a community that is dealing with a recovery now is one thing, but our community has, it seems like, has always been in recovery. And without access to government contracts, it puts us at a disadvantage, and it enables us to stay where we are. And that's not something that we want. As the sister said just before me, it's crumbs at the table. Many of the businesses in our community employ people that are from that community. That's what sustains a community. It's a whole, it's a circle of life in business. And so what we want to see is that more of those businesses get access and understand how to navigate the city. There's no reason why it should only be at 5%. We have over 100 different businesses in Nubian Square in that business district. And to my knowledge, there's only one, a minority business, a woman-led business that has a contract with the city to do plumbing. And that is, to me, it says a lot. It's about the numbers. We can do better. And I believe that the community, as well as the city, believes and wants things to be done better. So I have to implore all the city councilors to really take a look at how things are being done now, how we can do them better in the future, because these are people's livelihoods. It's about whether or not they're going to be able to put food on the table, or they're going to keep their block looking the best that it does in their business district, because they have the contracts, the money to employ their people to actually be a part of a private-public partnership to keep their community vital and help to revitalize it in the coming future. So it's really important that we understand that in the heart of the city, the numbers matter. And right now, our numbers are not reflective of our opportunity, of our skill sets, of our ability to really be an engine for this city. And we deserve the same equal treatment as everyone else. And so I, again, implore the city council to really take a look at this and to make sure that businesses of color, Black businesses, brown businesses, that they have access to what is everyone else has across the city. So that's pretty much what I wanted to say. I wanted to shed light on Nubian Square and what we're going through, and that this recovery can be done together, and it's a partnership. You can really use us to reach the people that you need to. It doesn't have to be behind a veil as it has been done in the past. And we just want to encourage you to continue to do that outreach and put those Black businesses on the mark. Let them have that opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Hardaway. And then last but not least, Brother Lowe. Brother Lowe was the sole person that was signed up in the waiting room. So I'm not sure if he was, maybe he wasn't intending to testify. So we'll give one more pause if Brother Lowe had wanted to chime in and add anything. Okay, so hearing none, then opening up back to counselors for questions for the community leader panelists.
Hello,
starting with.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Oh, okay. Yes, we can. Go ahead, Brother Lowe.
Thank you for the city councilors and everyone involved, because we all know this is a serious issue. And I must say, though, I'm really bothered, and I'm sure you all are, but it's personal with me because I just feel like there's not enough being done. There's not enough. I don't care if you tell me we're doing 20% right now. It's not enough. And I know we're nowhere near 20%. John, I'm a little disappointed in you, brother. I'm a little disappointed because to me, you haven't been responding to us as effective as you could have. You know, I mean, we used to talk once in a blue moon, but I don't hear from you at all now. And Mr. O'Malley, you remember when you were running and I was at your campaign place in Rosendale, West Roxbury line, and I asked you about $664 million, and you didn't know nothing about it. You say, at least you told me you didn't know nothing about it. I can't see anyone that's in the city government right now that shouldn't know. And one of the things that bothers me too is I met Mayor Walsh, Marty Walsh, 1 year ago today at the Juneteenth celebration. Marty was shaking hands with people, for photo ops, you know, the usual politician thing. But when I asked him as he was getting in the limousine to leave about, I was bothered by the less than 1% going to Black people. He looked at me like I was a problem. He was upset. Oh, Brother Lowe, it's not less than 1%. And I told him, Marty, I don't care if it's 3%, 5%, it's not enough. And he walked away abruptly saying, oh, we're working on it. So I want to know, John, from you, I want to know from Selena, I want to know in this year's time, what has progressed? What is when he said he's working on it, what has been done? You know, and you know, we got people all over, Black and brown people all over this city that's really going to be taking a beating, and especially business. Diane laid it out for you, equitable. I mean, and Sagun laid it out for you. I don't have to go over that. And you know what? Let me tell you something. When anybody from the city council come to me and they start talking about numbers and percentages, I know you ain't going nowhere. You ain't gonna bust a grape. You ain't gonna do nothing. Okay? Don't come to me talking about, oh, the percentage of this and this, and you know, and then you on top of that, you're gonna say stuff like, well, they gotta be certified and qualified, and we gotta do that. You're giving out, tell me if somebody waved their hand if they ain't giving out no bid contracts. Please. Come on. If Marty's really serious about this racial thing now, let's make it happen. He had the power to shut down construction. Did he say to people that, okay, you're out of compliance, and before you go back to work, you should be in compliance? That to me would have been at least the show. Now we got this racial thing going on. Come on now, this is Boston, y'all. Stop playing. Stop playing. And if you ain't gonna do nothing, get out the way. If you're not gonna do nothing, get out the way. That's okay. We'll forgive you for getting out the way. But let's do some real stuff here in Boston. You know, you want to talk about racial stuff? Let's do some stuff. We're gonna need something drastic. We can't talk about, and you know what kills me? This bit about disparity studies. Let me tell you something. I don't need a disparity study when you got $664 million going to white males. I don't need a disparity study. And as Diane said, what does this disparity study tell you? So I'm gonna leave it at that. I ain't gonna go no further because I get emotional.
Thank you, Brother Lowe.
I get upset. And thank you once again, everybody, and all, whether I like you or not. Thank you for coming together and trying to make an effort and trying to make a difference, because we need it here in the city of Boston.
Thank you. We appreciate it. Now we will, I think that's everyone who had been signed up to testify. So we'll return to counselors for any questions or closing statements, starting with the co-sponsor, Council President Janey.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me and see me okay?
Yes.
Thank you. So I want to thank my colleagues, certainly thank you again, thank my colleagues, thank the administration, thank the community panel. I do have a few questions In the interest of time, it's okay if people want to follow up and get them after, but I would like to get them on the record. I am very interested in the opportunities for doing more business with businesses owned by people of color, local, et cetera. I'm interested in hearing more about what we can do in our municipal buildings. I think about the bowling building, and I want to give a shout out and deep appreciation for the new contract. They have a new contract now, and they will be managed by a local company in my district, a company that is a minority business enterprise. So that is good news. But I'm thinking about the amount of business that BPS, the amount of money that BPS spends. So number one, they're one of the largest spends. And with at least food, isn't there an opportunity to say that for catering jobs of X number of people or more, that X% will be spent in this local area? Like, I'm looking for something clear and concrete like that. That's one thing. I would like to get clear who are the biggest. I know there are 4 departments. So I know BPS is one, I think Public Works, not sure what the 4 are, but there are 4 departments that have the biggest challenge and the biggest spend. What specifically is being done in each of those departments? For example, are the new FTEs that are coming, is that all living in OED? How are we making sure that those 4 departments that spend the most and who have not done the best job in this area are doing a better job? I would like to understand which contracts. So year after year, people have raised issues around some of our contracts are much too big. If we break them down, or if we're creative around some sort of joint venture or partnership arrangement, that we would see better success. So what has happened in that front since our last hearing? Have we broken any of these contracts down? I think of the food contracts with BPS as a barrier for local business owners, again, in my district, who would bid if they could. I think there was a missed opportunity to match more of our local folks or people of color in responding to COVID. And so while COVID is still with us, I wonder how we close that opportunity gap. For example, you heard in the community testimony, there are many folks who are making masks, Afrocentric masks. Is there an opportunity for, if we're supplying masks in our schools, hopefully we'll have schools open this fall. If we are we providing masks? If so, is there an opportunity to get those masks by local vendors who are making them? I share the concerns around the disparity study. I guess I understand why the city feels like it has to do one, but it's been an awful long time. It's been something I've been hearing since I've been on the council, and it's now 2.5 years. And for me, I see the disparity study whenever I walk through my district, because there are so many disparities. And so I would like a clear understanding of when that window will close, when we'll have it, what we can do in terms of moving forward. If someone could also just speak to the role of the new office. Lots of us are excited about welcoming Carolyn Crockett back to the city. What role will she play, or her office play, in ensuring that these numbers are improving? So that's my big dump on questions. Again, I know it's late in the hour, so if any can be answered here, that's great. If not, I look forward to the follow-up. Thank you again, Madam Chair, for your leadership, for your partnership, and many thanks to the administration and the community panel.
Thank you, Madam President. Next up for closing statements is Councillor Kenzie Bach.
Hi, Madam Chair, thank you so much. And thank you to all the panelists, especially the community panelists who I know have all been doing a lot of work for a very long time on this. And I just want to recognize that I think we all heard your frustration and the earned frustration here. And I want to echo the president's question specifically around schools, and because I do think the emergency spending around BPS is going to be a place to maybe seize that opportunity in the coming fall. But I also just want to ask, and this is again a follow-up from OED, but it seems like even without having the disparity study done in terms of who's available in the market right now, we could get for the council a little bit more of a sense of the big categories of our spending where we know that we don't have minority business participation. I've been thinking ever since we had the school building hearing in the winter about the fact that like every year we've got these contracts to put windows into our schools, put boilers in, to put, and like it's a continuous stream that is going to last forever. And it seems to me like seeding support for businesses in some of those big spending categories for us is something that we should be able to do. And that's a little bit separate from the incentive, like in the bidding process, which I understand is maybe legally dependent on the disparity study. I feel like we need to accelerate what we're doing here, especially in the capital money space, because I think we're going to be in a space for a few years where capital money and so construction projects and stuff are one of the main places that we've got money to spend. And as so many people today have mentioned, we're really facing a disparate impact even in the economic crisis that we're in. So I just really appreciate everyone today and want to thank the president and Councilor Wu for calling this hearing. And sorry, Madam Chair. Just also that I'd be really interested in, I know that Councilor Edwards has done a lot of work around co-ops and workers co-ops for immigrants. And I wonder about the city's TA and support for workers co-ops as a potential place to really move the needle in terms of minority participation in our contracting as well. So be interested in that going forward. Thank you so much. Sorry.
Thank you, Councilor Bach. And next up, Councilor Ricardo Arroyo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to thank all the participants, our community panelists, our administration panelists, and my colleagues on the council. These are obviously deep-rooted systemic issues that we really need to get to the bottom of. I echo the same concerns with the disparity study and the due date of December, the fact that it's been ongoing, the fact that these issues are quite urgent by December. Who knows where we are with just the pandemic and how that's affected businesses, and the timeline that we have to really sort of get in there and provide some of these things in the period of time that we are, quite frankly, in an emergency, not just in a pandemic from a pandemic standpoint, but also from a racial inequity standpoint. We've reached some real lows, and so I appreciate all the work that folks are putting into this. Look forward to participating in the future, and I just want to thank everybody for their participation and for the advocates for staying on top of us to make sure this gets done. So thank you all around.
Thank you, Councilor Arroyo. I think that is all the way through our council colleagues. So I just want to really thank you, everyone, for joining us, our panelists, our administration colleagues. We have a lot more work to do. We are eagerly waiting to collaborate and share the continued results. I've already sent over an information, just a reply to the email asking for the bump to include not just Q3, but the entire year's data, which hopefully will be available even with Q4 soon, but also including columns for more specific demographic data as available. I think several of my colleagues had asked for that. And we will follow up with a list of the items requested, but thank you so much, and looking forward to reconvening and making sure that we can go over the next quarterly report as well. So this will conclude, oh, no, I'm missing the docket number. This will conclude docket number 03, the hearing on docket number 0390, hearing on equity in City of Boston procurement and purchasing. This hearing is adjourned.